provided for in the laws of the country, but still it was identified in 2018, and in 2023 it's the same thing that was identified, meaning that there was no improvement when you're looking at this from a recommendation perspective. And yet we have got the provisions or the mechanisms in place provided by SADC themselves to ensure that the pre, during, and the post-electoral processes are considered, or they are worked on, or they are looked at, so that if there's any way where it is identified that if this is left unattended, then the running of the electoral process will not be smooth as it is expected under the Constitution and as per the SADC, guidelines. So it is clear that when you're running these elections, they have to conform to what the laws of the land says and to what the guidelines speaks to. These guidelines to which us as Zimbabwean folks, we appended our signature to say that yes, we will abide by this, we will follow this, we will ensure that our conduct is going to be guided by these guidelines. And it is very clear. If you go to the SADC website, it is very clear. They have it clear in black and white what is expected. But when it comes to our nation, some of these things, it's either they are not expected to be binding on us on the basis that we are a sovereign nation. There's nobody that can dictate to us what is supposed to happen. Or we just plain ignorant of their existence. And we just say that, what, let's do, what we do best. Do our own thing. So there are so many questions now that are arising. And it's quite, interesting, ladies and gentlemen, for us to be familiar. I liked what, the SADC, post, said, that you need to understand, the role of the electoral observer, mission. And some of us, we've read, yes, we do understand that, their role is not to conduct elections. We do understand that. But we do understand that they observe the elections. They observe what is working and what is not working. They consult with stakeholders, different stakeholders, so many of them, including political parties, the SAC itself, to make sure that their report, when they do produce one, is representative of what would have, or what is obtaining during that electoral process. So yeah, it is quite important for us to be understanding what that means, and also on the recommendation, what do those means. So yeah, let me open up the speaker panel, ladies and gentlemen. And can I just do a little bit of housekeeping? The space yesterday ended up degenerating into something else that is alien to what I've experienced when I hold, space, sessions. We ended up using, colorful words. We ended up creating a certain, discourse which did not go down well with others. I want to start before anybody, comes on to being a speaker. I want to start by saying, if you're coming on to be a speaker, please come here knowing that you're going to be factual in your presentation, knowing that you're going to be respectful of others, knowing that you're going to not going to be using any vulgar words to describe others. And when you're pushing back on what would have been said. And we don't bring characters of individuals into the discussion. So I just want us to just engage on the topic. I know that as we traverse down the social media streets, we might pick up arguments with other people. And because some of those people might not want, to engage with us when we are talking to them on those threads, please do not use the platform as a way of settling your scores or of things that you'd have started elsewhere, away from this platform. We are here to discuss SADC and their role when it comes to the observation of elections. So finally, if anyone decides to be disrespectful of others, use colorful, language to describe others, I will not hesitate to drop you and to ban you or to block you from being a speaker. Anyone is welcome to come in and make, their presentations, as long as we are staying true to the topic. As long as I will allow Kutizo and my co-host who are going to be joining me, we will allow Kuti the conversation in flow on very smooth. Thank you very much for listening. I hope ningizvapinda mumusoro. I know hangu kuti muri vanhu vakuru handingakukontrorei. Makavhura maaccounts enyu mega, ini handina kana sendi randinocontributa. Asi ngatingoengage nayoka in a way yokuti tinorespektana. Saka thank you very much for that, vanhu vaMwari. Saka ndavhura hangu malines angu kana kuti marequest angu malines angu apa kai. Unongojaira kuti ndavhura for ladies and gentlemen, the lines are now open. So get ready, to phone. Right. Anyway, so that is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to acknowledge everybody. What I normally do is when I start, the space, I start, by greeting folks. But let me quickly, do that before I get people, to speak. Finals, how you doing? Padare, really says they Juke, how you doing? Bonnie, how you doing? Smatters, how you doing? Voices, really say Munhu, Mkoma Munhu, really say talk, how you doing? Am I the kitchen? How are you? Thank you very much for following me. Priscilla, how you doing? Massey Weeks, really say Marvel D, how you doing? Citizens D, how are you? Chaka Chai, really say, and welcome to the space. Wongai, how you doing? Micah does really say Mamo, really say Karatizo, how you doing? Lakas does really say, how are you? In Exile, how you doing? GMB Max, really saying Tini. How are you? Hope Shibaya really say Franson, how are you? Tafazgon, Jill, Kamusasa, how you doing? Thank you very much for coming through. Mkoma Charles really say Tafi, how are you? Priska Z, how you doing? Kwanele really say Nachis, how are you? Nokukanya really say how you doing? Thank you very much, for coming through, Josie. Thank you very much, T-Man, Flanjiwe, Milton, Kudzi, Natsai. Another Priscilla, thank you very much. Lisa, thank you very much. Ubuntu, Maura, Kwakuba, how you doing? Godfrey Masawi, how you doing? Thank you very much for coming through. Mind Your Own, Hokoso, how you doing? Thank you very much for coming through. George T, Pofu, Dex, Ralph, how you doing? Thank you very much for coming through. And Wams, thank you very much for coming through. And the other 38 people that are currently not listening. I cannot see you at the present moment, but thank you very much, for coming through. Finals. How are you this afternoon?
Uncle, good afternoon.
Mushe. Could you say how is it at your ends?
It was raining in the morning, but it's back to normal now. Nice and sunny. I will just go for a walk and get to bed there, Papa, because it looks all right.
Right. Thank you very much, for coming through. Yeah, today, the topic is there, and this topic is coming from what was posted by SADC when they said, understand what our role is when it comes to the observation of elections. And this has had folks, this has been posted and reposted and reposted. So it was trending. What is your understanding as to why this was so trending, as if we were not fully aware of the role of SADC?
Okay. Good afternoon, guys. Right. Thanks for the disclaimer. Kutanga space in terms of respecting each other. I think it was getting out of hand in all spaces actually. But thanks a lot, Ningi, for bringing that to rein ourselves in and put emotions aside. I think the reason why it trended so much because pakanga pasitombori my blade lines. It is what it says on the tin. Because we find ourselves in this situation at here in Zimbabwe. On the other side, we've got my expectations from the citizens, possibly SADC's role, Yakamira so, and then we try and bring ambiguity out of its primary role, and that's exactly what has been happening. So I think the reposting Pacheshayo, others, it's a vindication. We've always said this is the royal side of we thought this is the Ningi. So I think it's okay what's happening now, so that at least atina patino zoti atina unyatsonzwisisa royal SADC. It has always been said their role is more observer and also being an advisory body and non-binding for that matter. Apana pa inobainda zvekutobainda. I know manero pane munhu akaverenga SADC on a different space achitaura kuti I don't know if it was you uncle paitaurwa zvekuti when push comes to shove they can sanction a particular state, but I didn't understand. I didn't know because I didn't go into detail with this. The sanction party actually is it an embargo? What it tikatadza comply with the requirements? What do they do? They in a sovereign state. So we have to pursue that, and probably when a citizens panel, they might have read that as well. They can expand on that particular issue. But on the role, yes, SADC, I don't think I had any confusion. I don't think anyone here has confusions as to what their primary role is, which is to observe and offer recommendations. It is upon or incumbent upon those sovereign states. Swaziland, we're going to have elections soon. They'll do the same, says Zimbabwe, and offer recommendations, and it will be upon those nations to pursue the recommendations and adjust accordingly. So I don't think Papa name confusion from my side anyway. But anyway, I'll leave it there for now. Uncle, thanks.
Right. Thank you very much, for explaining, that. Let me go to Padare. You can take the mic and make your presentation, please.
Yeah, I think we are where we started off from, isn't it? I think when people have got expectation management, and expecting something, they're expecting some result. I can understand the desperate measures and the desperate voice of need. There must be something that we're going to get out of this election, in terms of the presidential count, and I can see that, but I think that is what it is. The hope that is non-existent, the hope, the outcry of those that are seeking to hear something different, and that's what I think gave this notion of SADC. SADC, it's good that SADC has actually come up and has actually articulated what it does and how it stands. It's just like Mbeki's statement yesterday. It's exactly what it is here. I think expectation management and everything else is why we are here. But I hope people will move on now from here and stop talking about SADC and have some hope from something that it will never come. I think the sooner the better. But I can tell you it's not going to help because already Takuta thank you rally is, going again backwards like 2018. So, yeah, that's the sad part of Zimbabwe politics. And that's what it is. The observer mission, done and dusted. They still to write their report, final report, is still to be approved, and so forth. So yeah, and the authentication of the elections, they were authenticated. People are already forming, my meetings and so forth, my mayors and chi. So it's a difficult one because you can't tell people to move on when they're hoping for something that is, non-existent. Yeah, that's just my contribution. But there's nothing there for the SADC. Chamisa's already said, according to your posts that you did earlier, he says he's a parallel government. So in himself, he sees himself as another government within Zimbabwe. So it is us
Because
who must normalize it.
you're saying that on the basis, because if you listen to what he said according to the voter tabulation, parallel voter tabulation that they did, they got 2/3 parliamentarians, and I think he spoke of a figure which is I think it was 66%, something. But I think you said that
Yeah,
on the basis of those results. But anyway, that is another
yeah.
issue. I
But you see,
wanted.
that's yeah. But that tabulation is where we always say this: we have accepted abnormal to be normal, because he continuously being led to do whatever he does, and no one is holding him to account. So we're now in another cycle of
No,
the voter.
but what account on what basis? If I am doing
Yeah, but the,
a
the, the
if I
tabulation.
listen, if I'm doing a parallel tabulation, that I was even challenged by Chigumba to say that if you're not happy with how we do things, do your own parallel tabulation. I'm challenging you to do that. Do your own parallel, tabulation. And when I do that, it becomes a problem. How is that so?
No, the thing is, you still have to bring that tabulation into the courts of law and align yourself, like a true democrat. This is my tabulation. This is my evidence. And how do you move? You guys are lying. But this is how it is. I have my evidence here. And actually normalizing what he has done and without whether our constitution is flawed, whether there's some still things to be done in terms of correcting ZEC to work in a certain way of perfection. But we still have to exercise that and put it to test and say, according to this, ZEC failed because Chamisa, he's got 2/3 according to my tabulation. This is the evidence I have. But again, if we are not going to challenge him and say, stop playing with the children's minds of Zimbabwe, we are actually then Isusu will be creating a terror mindset that is very ungovernable and a very difficult place to be, for the next generation. Many thanks.
Right. Can I put you to task on this one issue, if you don't mind? I want to interrogate on the recommendations anyway, because that is what we are speaking to. That in 2018 we had recommendation that spoke to let's take an example of the voters roll, that in 2018 ZEC was urged to ensure that they avail the voters roll as and when required by stakeholders to allow enough time for inspection and verification. And then when you look at 2023 again, access to the voters roll um, in order to improve perceptions amongst the public, political parties, and candidates. ZEC is advised to strictly follow the provisions of the Constitution on transparency, access to information, and the timely availing of the voters' roll in accordance with the stipulation under the Electoral Act. So it was a problem in 2018, and it was a problem in 2023. 3 it was a recommendation then, it is a recommendation now. What is the use, what is the purpose? Because it seems as if there's no appetite to improve what would have been picked out before. And when people and when we start to say that this election here, the way that ZEC is conducting, the election, like, let me borrow what Ostalos, spoke about when I was, speaking about, ZEC, to say that, the way that ZEC was doing, or the way that ZEC, conducted, this election, it proved that it was an organization, that is not, fit, for purpose. They keep on doing, the same thing. In 2018, it was highlighted. Now it is being highlighted, and it's the same thing, over and over again. So can we really? Why the effort to want to shut down people here when they are raising, these things?
You've asked a very good question, Butizo. What in an overall position, you have to say to yourself, maybe it's just me who's optimistic with the greater position of future Zimbabwe and how we can grow our democracy as we go. Like I said, there are things to celebrate within this election. They have got some women quota, children's, young persons quotas, and so forth. So there are some great leaps there, even across board. We have seen even the CCC and the ZANU-PF putting new faces and new young faces into parliament. There's some growth there. If I agree with you that there are things that need that reform to have happened, if it's a miracle. But remember, this reform don't just happen in the way we say so. They happen in the pace of those that are constituted to make it happen within
But 5 years, surely 5 years, is that not a long enough period?
Yeah, but that's the thing. We've got committees being formed next week. Many will be headed by CCC and so forth. I hope.
No, I'm talking about the last 5 years where they're not coming. I mean, why?
But you can't hold. You see, this is the thing. Chamisa cannot then go on and hold.
No, I'm not talking about Chamisa. I'm talking about these reports. I'm talking about the appetite to improve the environment.
Yeah, I hear you, and I say to you, but that doesn't give someone, because your narrative came after a presentation that of him. But if we have to say to ourselves, does that then give
No. This narrative is coming from the reports that I am telling you. I read the 2018 report and I'm reading a 2023 report. Mm-hmm. That is where this narrative is coming from. Forget about Chamisa here. Let us fix that on these and let us focus on. Let us speak to what is being spoken.
We all agree that there is always room for improvement. We always agree there's room for improvement. But if we have to ask people here what reforms were made in 2018 for during for ZEC, many people would not even articulate what improvements were made during that time.
On the voters' roll. Yeah. No, listen, on the voters' roll, there was no reform on the voters' roll. It's just an improvement to make sure that voters' roll is produced on time. Yeah. That voters' roll is made available on time.
I will never give excuses to ZEC, because that's ZEC's mandate to do that. We also want that to happen for Zimbabwe, which ZEC needs to perform. But I also sympathize with them sometimes when they go to to our parliament and say we are poorly funded. At the end of the day, we've got they had many other issues that they had. But the thing is, the whole point is, Gerald, is this question. If you feel that this election doesn't save you, you should have not gone into it. And that's paramount. And that's a very important message of defiance and resilience. We are not going to partake in this because it's not perfect. Because at the end of the day, are we celebrating the MPs that have been put through with this unreformed position by ZEC? Yes, we are. If we are saying we are celebrating them, then despite its flaws, it has produced something that it is in there. And then we always have to say to ourselves, how best can we improve as we go forward with this thing that we call ZEC, to make it a fairer system for us all, in order to reduce. Remember, there will always be disputed elections. There will always be disputed elections. It doesn't matter whether you go, because our constitution, remember, Gerald, when I came here in the country, our constitution allows for that position to be natural. So our constitution will always allow the ability for someone to challenge and go away and challenge. Do you see what I mean? And that's the danger of our constitution. It's a danger to itself, and there's a danger sometimes to the future of a generation, because it empowers people where they are not supposed to be empowered.
Right. Using your words, many thanks. Let me go to Citizen Z. Citizen Z, how are you, my brother?
No, baby. Uncle Jed, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for for waiting, but the floor is yours.
No. So I think what the statement is exactly what it is. I think it's answering what can we say? It's answering a narrative that was starting to develop that becomes the wrong narrative. So they to obviously correct us into the right path.
So are you saying that this was deliberate and it was aimed? It was not aimed at the people of the kingdom, but it was aimed at us Zimbabweans.
100%, and maybe the people of the kingdom. Anyone that thinks that SADC can do that, and let's be honest, they are coming. They're just coming from us, so they cannot answer the people of the kingdom. They're answering us. The ones that just had an election last month, and let's be honest, we are the one that we have been alluding to that narrative, or not? Yeah, alluding to the narrative. So it was a correction. We do recommendations. That's true. They do not do elections. That is true. But that does not mean they can't do other things. They can do quite a lot of things. But on the aspect of doing the or redoing the elections or running them, I know they do not. It is just that. But we have to say to ourselves, we are at a position today that we're not at last month. Last month on this date. Again, last month on this date, 1 week before or 3 days before, 1 day before, that was a totally different position. And the route of SADC before the election is very clear. They could do things. On the election, they do the preliminary report after the election, and then the path is cleared out. Yeah. Then if anything happens, it creates another path. You understand what I'm saying, Angles? So with each event, the reaction of the stakeholders, meaning the people as well, turns around and creates another path that a SADC takes. If the reaction stays as constant as what the SADC turns around and sees it as, it continues like that. They just keep on reacting to that, and that's it, unless there is a reaction and then another path is created. And I think at the moment, the path that we truly want, we have not reacted to it. So that means that a line of that SADC can take becomes impossible for SADC to take without a reaction. Yeah, let me give you a good example. When a election is done, SADC turns around and observes, obviously, and whatever comes out of that election, it has to therefore deal with the situation that comes out of that election, disputed or not. As what I said, yes, there's elections that disputed. That's true, but the question becomes, how do you differentiate a dispute from a constitutional or something that is therefore viewed as unconstitutional. Yeah. So that event happens like what we had at home, something that is viewed as unconstitutional. Then a path is therefore created. This is when the path of dialogue is therefore put in. Yeah.
Yeah, right. If you can, let me just, hold you, on that one, because I think, that is where I want you to, to dig deeper and actually explain, the sort of things, that can happen during, that period. Because, and the reason why I want that explanation, to go deeper is on the basis that there are people that are looking at the SADC election observer mission as something, that just starts with them observing, ends with them, putting out a preliminary, report, and then, their final, report, and forgetting that there's what is called the SADC Electoral Advisory Council that comes in 3 phases: the pre-election, the post-election, the election period, and the post-election, where it is said that this SEAC undertakes post-election reviews, which is of particular relevance should there be a conflict situation. What sort of reviews and what sort of work does this body do? And when we are talking about dialogue, what necessitates the creation of this dialogue when it comes to a post-election conflict?
Yeah. So that one takes the form. So now you have to turn around and say to yourself, what you have to look at it in SADC's eyes, yeah, not in our eyes. So as you said, 3 stages, uncles, yeah. Pre-election, still there is dialogue, yeah, to prepare everyone else to say, hey, is everyone okay, or concerns and everything else, yeah. Pre-election dialogue done with. The moment election happen, now you're dealing with election dialogue. Still happens, yeah. Now, the most important one is the post-election thing with the advisory council. It becomes now how now the people react to the results. Now that's when the council now we're at the stage of the council is now running this now, and the council is looking for pointers that it has already turned around and marked them on their structure. If those pointers are not there, yeah, the dialogue just becomes a dialogue just to turn around and smoothen things out, because the whole point of SADC is to actually turn around and make sure that things are steady. Yeah, there is no overspill to other countries. There's no disturbance and everything else. That's their whole point. So when there is no reaction, let's say from the ground, combined with civil organizations, combined with political parties, that's it. That means the advisory council's job becomes a clear path to just turning around and smoothing grievances. Yeah, grievances of just talking. At this moment in time, to SADC's eyes, Zim is okay. Yeah, yes, there might be problems, people talking about this, but there are problems that time can fix. And this is when now the recommendations come in. Let's say, if what we are saying is the people on the other side with grievances is therefore looked at as small, this is when now recommendations actually come in and work very well. But because of us, what we're saying becomes constitutional and make the election flawed. The pointers that the SADC Advisory Council is supposed to be looking at are not there. You see? And if they are not there, that means that part as well, we have to cancel. They cannot take that part and create a situation that turns around and fits into their solution of conflict. Yeah, and when we're talking about conflict, we're not talking about guns and everything else. It's just two groups that are not actually in agreement and actually are showing it visibly. Yeah, and SADC turns around and points that out. In its if you go through its documents that it releases through the advisory council, it has to be visible for them to actually turn around and deal with. But at the same time, they actually acknowledge that sometimes it is not visible. This is when they turn around and give an example of South Africa in 2016. Yeah, that means they acknowledge that some things are not visible, but then you have to now go back to South Africa 2016 and understand how they dealt with that. Yeah, when the grievances are not visible. And obviously the answer to that is you see it as what it is today because that's how they dealt with. They just continue with it smooth and at the back of let's say a back room where no one sees and everything just turned around and quieted down. Then you've got another example that SADC uses itself. It uses Mauritius. I can't remember what year it was, when now the grievances are visible. Yeah, it uses Zambia when the grievances are visible. This is when now the advisory council comes in its play. Now, what it's trying to do there is to actually not overturn, but actually bring the stakeholders to come into a dialogue, a situation where they can actually turn around and do three things. Yeah. So let me tell you what the three things that they do, Uncle. Yeah. Give me a second, because I've got the document here. So you've got you've got three things that they are trying to solve. Yeah. So it's prevention, yeah, of conflict. Number one. Then what's the other one? Management. Yeah. And then mitigation. Yeah, that's their scope now. Yeah, that's the stage that we're at. That's the process now that we're supposed to be concentrating at, and that process is what now they turn around and give another good example again. This is now when you are dealing with Zimbabwe, 2018. Yeah. Then the question now, you have to go back to Zimbabwe. What was happening after the election to give them the advisory council to give it that scope? Then you turn around and say, okay, there were one group that was saying it had won. The other group was saying that the elections are flawed and everything else. And this group was visibly aggrieved by what was happening. Yeah. Then you look at the events that turned around and put encapsulation of what the visibly aggrieved was. Guys, that is normal. You can see protest, moving, and dispute that turns around and balances the argument of the political parties. Again, they actually turn around and acknowledge that in some cases political parties turn around and lie about this. They say things, yeah, yet the ground is not there. Yeah, the ground is not actually turning around and showing what the political parties are saying, and they acknowledge that. So that means they are aware of that. They still need this ingredient of visible on the ground that actually turns around and helps with the mitigation. Now, this is why we turned around and saw, uncles, just after the elections, you saw the elders coming in.
Did they?
Yes, the elders came in after the election results were said.
They actually flew into the country? Because I thought, the thing was sort of cancelled. I don't know. Yeah, was it not cancelled? Like, it was supposed to be headed by the former Tanzania leader, right? And then he ended up not coming. So did the other guys, manage to come in?
Yes, I think in my head still says the elders came in.
Okay.
So the elders become the after the observers, the elders are the ones that come in. Now when you see that happening, now you're dealing with the advisory council that is one to forward. That means they acknowledge there's a dispute here. Yeah. And then the advisory council comes in and locks in. Now, when the advisory council locks in, now we have to leave everything aside and say, okay, what is the procedure of this animal called the advisory council? Yeah, this is when now you start to see. Let me bring you back to what political parties were saying after the
quickly do that, and then I'll move on to others. Yeah,
no worries. Do you remember when the political parties were turning around after the election, turning around and saying they are on the dialogue thing?
I mean, an example, Nelson Chamisa said he's speaking, to SADC. So I'm thinking that he's speaking, to the council.
No. That was the elders.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that was the elders. So they were coming in to actually turn around and note the people's grievances. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Now the advisory council. Now I don't think it has actually turned around and came in yet, because there is nothing to prevent, to mitigate, or to manage.
All right.
There's nothing. What are you preventing? In Zimbabwe at the moment, everything is good. Yeah, according to SADC. What are you mitigating? Nothing. Right. Everything is good. Yeah, they're just moving on with their lives. Yeah. Yes, there are grievances like any other one. What are you managing? Nothing. Yeah, everything is cool. So they turn around and that's the way we are. And that's the place that we're at.
We have not yet gotten to that stage of looking at it from those three stations, like management or mitigating, because we are being told that the ground is being prepared for the mobilization of citizens to demonstrate against the election results. So that right there, is that not the stage now where this advisory council will actually come in and try to mitigate?
No, Uncle, because the time now we are trying to put SADC's time into our time. We're trying to move ourselves.
So this is time limited.
Yes, this is SADC's own time, yeah, and we cannot change SADC's time to fit ourselves to say 3 months from now we are going to turn around and do something. Then SADC comes in and brings something that is post election tools, yeah.
Right. Okay. Right.
So anyway, that's where the problem is.
Right. Okay. Stay right there. I'll give you another opportunity, to go over if there are any other issues, that you needed, to, clarify. But let me bring in, Smarters, into the conversation. Right, Smarters. We heard from the report, the Observer preliminary, report. In their conclusion, they indicated that the pre-election and the voting phases were peaceful and they were calm. But they then go on to say, however, some aspects of the harmonized election fell short of the requirements of the Constitution, Electoral Act, and SADC principles and guidelines. Does that alone not indicate, does it indicate that, we've got a crisis with this election?
Confirmed, Ango. Confirmed, Ango Jed. And I don't understand why ZANU-PF is celebrating that message from SADC. And if you look at the message, you also need to look at the context, right? That was a response. It was a follow-up message to some other tweets that was originated by SADC, the Secretariat. Right? Then they just put in that statement. And that statement is just there to conclude what we've always said as the position. To say, when you look at SADC and their mandate, they are coming to Zimbabwe to observe, right? They are coming on an observation mission. So their mandate is on observation. So we know that. We knew that before that tweet. But the point that we need to ask is, why are they coming in to observe? Right? And that has always been our argument. The why part, not the what part. Why are they in Zimbabwe? Why are they coming in to observe? Then, if you could please excuse my boys. All right. So the thing is, so that's the question that we want to ask ourselves, and trying also to respond to your question, angle, Jeds. Right? To say they are coming on an observation mission. Why are they making these? Why are they making these observations? Why are they in Zimbabwe in the first place? So one cannot help but go back now to the mandate. When you look at their overall mandate, according to the principles on general elections, right? They do have a mandate that Zimbabwe is a signatory to, right? And I'm so happy that Citizen Z spoke about those 3 stages. But before we go to the 3 stages, in an attempt to try to respond to the why question, right? So SADC comes to Zimbabwe to observe, and through their observation, they are trying to monitor electoral processes, right? And in them monitoring the electoral processes, they are looking at issues to do with transparency, credibility, and fairness, right? So those are the things that they are coming in to say, we are monitoring. We'll look at issues to do with transparency, issues to do with credibility, among other things. I know if you go on to the preliminary report, you're going to look at those points to do with the youth, the disadvantaged, the disabled, the women. You also look at those things, right? So these guys are not just coming in for holiday. They are not on vacation when they come through for elections. And once they've made those observations, remember from Citizen Z's presentation, he spoke about conflict prevention, which is the main reason why these guys are coming through to our elections. Why do we have elections in the first place? Ango Jedza, we are having elections because if you go back before democracy, right? Nelson Chamisa would need to have guns, right, in order to topple Idi Mnangagwa, then go through wars and wars. Then after those wars, whoever emerges victorious then becomes the leader and the president of a nation, right? This is where we are coming from. Something that we feel it's exocommune, it's savage. We wouldn't want to do that, right? So now the introductions of election now is to make sure that we don't get into these conflicts. So the why part of SADC is they are looking at the things that are going to drive conflicts, right? So if you're going to give people the vote, if the power to vote, it means they can express themselves. They don't need to exercise their muscles. They don't need to bring in the bullets or the guns. They can still express their power, their authority, their rights using the vote. So when SADC then comes in, they want to prevent conflicts, right? Because prevention, as we all know, prevention is better than cure, right? So they are coming in and say, all right, let's look at the Constitution. What does your Constitution say? With regards to the elections or choosing your own leader? What does the Constitution say? Then they'll look at the Electoral Act. What does the Electoral Act say? Your Electoral Act, right? So they are looking at your laws, right? Then over and above that, they also look at their principles to say, right, when you look at SADC, what are the principles, that work as guidelines to elections, right? Still, it's principles that, like I said, our country, our government, they are a signatory to those principles now. To say, okay, for you to be able to have proper elections, there has to be transparency. So when you look at transparency, what are the things that you need to look at for you to say, this election was transparent? You need to look at the governing body, right? You need to look at the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, in our case, right? So transparency, right from the pre-election, what happened on the election, and also post-election. So we do have so many questions around the pre-election, period. When you look at litigation and everything that took place then, and most importantly, the question that you asked, Dangoje, the questions to do with the voters' roll, right? Because on the voters' roll, if you look at the recommendations, go back to 2013, go back to 2008, 2018, voters' roll has always been topical on SADC recommendations. Let's not focus on EU. I know what EU said, the category and all the other, observer missions, right? But right now we're just looking at SADC, right? So that voters' roll, it has always been topical on the recommendations. But when you look at ZEC now in terms of their attitude to the voters' roll, they are not releasing the voters' roll. Then the question is, why are they not releasing the question? So if you are going to subject the election on a credibility test or on a transparency test, ZEC will fall short, right? Based on that. Then issues to do with, the other variables. For instance, the SADC team, they asked ZEC on the readiness for the elections. ZEC, are you ready? And this was before the election. And ZEC was like, yes, it's all systems go. We are good to go. Then on the election day, what do we see? Polling stations in Harare, Bulawayo, Manicaland, they had no ballot papers. When there was a statement that was issued by ZEC to say they printed 7.9 to allow a buffer. So the question then is, ZEC, what then happened? Did you lie to us? Right? But the question doesn't, you don't stop on, did you lie to us? As if it's just a dichotomous question where you expect yes or no. You want to look at the intent. What was the intent? Right? What was the intention? What was the reason behind you lying, to us with, the issues of the ballot printing? And again, man, if you're to go to the Bible says, if you cannot be faithful on small things, then you can never be trusted with big things. So if you cannot be trusted on just printing of ballot papers, then there's no way you're going to pass, the credibility test. Again, we are looking at prevention. Because remember, we have substituted the ballots, we have substituted the bullets with the ballots, right? Where we're supposed to take bullets, now we have the ballots. So for us to be able to make sure that we don't restore our settings or default settings, of having to go back to, to the bullets, you need to look at the system, the whole process, and see if it's really working, right? Then the period after election, we're still on this variable called transparency. You want to look at ZEC and say, okay, now that you have announced, this election result, you gave Mnangagwa this much, the opposition this much. Can you please just give us how you got to the final result? Like what you usually do, right? Where they would give us proper collation of the results. If you're going to put them on an Excel, it's fine, right? The same Mnangagwa in Mashonaland West, Mashonaland East, then you drill down to the polling, to the polling station level. And what we are just trying to do here is we are trying to subject our elections to the credibility test, right? Then the other variable, after prevention, there are issues to do with promotion of democratic values. Because it doesn't make sense for me to say, hey, SADC are just coming to observe. So you also, like, in our attempt to ask the why question, why are they coming to observe the elections? You get to this reason to say, because they want to promote democratic values. Man, the moment you bring in democratic values, what are we talking about? And I like the way his champion yesterday broke it down. To say demo, it's people, right? Democratic, that's power. Or legitimate authority. Let me put it as legitimate power. So for you to have the authority to rule, the authority to distribute resources, the authority to enact laws, that power is derived from the people. It comes from the people of Zimbabwe. And how does it come from the people of Zimbabwe, or how is it transferred from the people of Zimbabwe to the executive, the parliament, or the other arms of government? It's transferred through the election, right? But now, what do we see in Warren Park? In Warren Park, we see people who were, stopped from exercising their civic duty, because now they are staying in Kwekwe. So they came to Harare on the election day. They wanted to vote at some polling station in Warren Park. When they got there, they could not vote up until 6 p.m. and they had to leave, right? Because they could not wait, man. They needed to travel back to Kwekwe, right? So when you look at an election, for us to say the election was free and fair, what does it mean? Free, it means there is no fuzz to intimidate you. You can express yourself. You don't have to pass through some desk where you are required to put in your IDs, right? You are free to express yourself and choose the leader, that you feel they have the capacity to and the attributes to take our country forward. Then the fair part then answers the question to say every vote counts, right? And that every vote, it has got every vote has got a similar weight, right? We cannot leave the election to just maybe people from Uzumba Maramba Pfungwe, because for them, they went to vote on the voting day, 7 a.m. Polling stations were opened. There were no disturbances there, so they managed to vote, right? There were no disturbances in Uzumba Maramba Pfungwe and all other rural areas or rural constituencies, right? But can we say the same, for our citizens in Bulawayo? We can't say the same, right? So when you look at just this variable of the election being free and fair, you see that ZEG will fall short, in terms of how they managed to run this election. So after we've done this angle, Gerard, then I move back to your question to say the rule of law. What does our constitution say?
Yeah, can you quickly do that?
Yes,
can you quickly do that so that I can bring in others as well, please?
Okay, that's fine. So now, just to respond to that question, if you read, the report from SADC, SADC noted that there were some aspects, right, that fell short of our constitution, the constitution of Zimbabwe. Not only that, they also fell short of the guidelines of SADC, right? So the constitution of Zimbabwe, the guidelines of Zimbabwe, also the guidelines of SADC, and also our Electoral Acts. So once you have said that, once you have established that, so the issue that we are dealing with is we do have an unconstitutional president. We do have an unconstitutional, Zimbabwe electoral system, and we have an unlawful election. And that issue needs to be addressed. It has got nothing to do.
So it speaks to an unconstitutional everything, including the MPs and the councillors.
Yes. It speaks to everything. Everything is unconstitutional. But man, when you're dealing with a delinquent player like ZANU-PF, right, just as I learned. So ZANU-PF, when they went into this election, if you look at the delimitation exercise, how compromised it was, their idea was to get 2/3 majority in parliament. Once they have 2/3 majority, they will change the term limits. They were going to change the qualification age. Right now, our constitution says for you to run for president, you need to be 40, at least. They will put that at 60 or 70, just to try to make sure that, they will put some spanners, in Nelson Chamisa's way, right? So we stopped them from doing that. So this is the thing that we are looking at. But the fact that we have our MPs and our councillors in government right now as we speak, people should not confuse that as if we are sanitizing this unlawful activities that took place on August 23rd. No, that's not it. So when we ask for free, fair, fresh elections, we know that ZANU-PF, under normal conditions where we have a electoral board that's transparent, that's going to, deliver the election in a free and fair environment, ZANU-PF will never win 2/3 in majority. Triple C will win the 2/3. So they managed to get whatever number of MPs they got because of intimidation. My mother was intimidated through the fuzz. My uncles, my father was also intimidated, even though he doesn't like ZANU-PF. He ended up voting ZANU-PF because they forced him to submit his ID number before he voted. And that's a fact.
Oh dear. Right. Thank you very much, for that. Let me put you on hold. For the time being, I want to bring in others. I see people have got your hands up. Right. So hey, Mofu, tell us, how are we doing on the people that are requesting? Are you seeing many more coming through?
I think we're good at the moment, Uncle G. So yeah, I'll keep adding, but at the moment there's no more. So we can
Right.
go.
Right. Thank you very much. Ngoma hopes by. Sorry, hope you good. Sorry, Nigeria hope you bad. Sorry. Sorry, Ngoma hope.
It's fine, language.
Right. Thank you very much. Take the mic, please.
Yes. Thank you for adding me as a speaker and for holding the space. I'm not gonna say much, and I'm happy that Smart has already sort of preempted some of my points. However, though, I will add, because I agree with most of what Smart has just said. I will add that SADC has got limited control. It's an institution that has got members. However, they have limited control over the operations and the running of within member states. So what that basically means is SADC put together members and says, look, what is good for us? What is our interest? Having peaceful elections, having peace within member states, right? So SADC comes up with these stipulations, policies, guidelines. Then it is incumbent on the member states themselves to sort of adopt and ratify the guidelines stipulated by SADC. So where they adopt, ratify, where they put those requirements is something that can be different from one member to the other. Some will adopt it and even amend some of their provisions in their constitutions, the electoral guidelines or the Electoral Act, and say, look, this is what SADC has recommended, this is what SADC wants, and this is what we are going to adopt as part of our own processes. So one of the things that we need to establish is, of the SADC guidelines, what did we ratify ourselves to become a law in our own country? So that if we defaulted on the SADC guidelines that we have already adopted as part of our own legal instruments or requirements, then we are wrong at SADC expectations, and we are also at the wrong side of our own laws. However, SADC and even our legal system understand that you can never have a perfect election. So by that I mean you will flout, you will do one or two things which are wrong. So there are requirements, as we all know, but there are also fundamental requirements, meaning if we don't comply with those fundamental requirements, then it renders the whole process fatal. So again, it needs to be established if ZEC fell short, or if our elections fell short of requirements, did the process fall short of fundamental requirements? What do I mean by that? Late delivery of ballot paper obviously prejudices voters, but was it a fundamental requirement to the electoral process? If it was, then obviously the question arises, can we declare the elections null and void because of this shortcoming? So we have, I think, a myriad of shortcomings in our own, the just ended elections. We need to establish all those shortcomings and conclude to say our elections were fundamentally flawed. Therefore, they are null and void. However, though, whilst we are having this discussion, I want us to just think about something that I find interesting. The problem that we are having at the moment is not just the problem of the election results. The problem that we are having at the moment is a problem of the process pre, during, and post-elections. So, just to give one example, Monzora, who came from historically one of the biggest, if not the biggest, opposition parties in Zimbabwe. He withdrew from the election, citing that there were problems with the process that was going on. So Monzora has got equal right to also go to SADC and say, look, if these elections were done in a proper way, I stood a good chance of winning the elections. So SADC cannot just come and impose and say, so Chamisa wins the elections, even if my vote count is going to be in Chamisa's favor. They have to be they have to be consistent in their approach. So it's not just gonna be the process. We ignore everything that happens wrongly before the election. Let's count the votes. I would be surprised if SADC takes that approach as well. Even though I had Ramaphosa insinuate something along those lines, they have to look at the whole process and say, look, was there compliance during the different stages of the electoral process? Was there compliance? However, SADC cannot dictate what the member state should do. The member state should then come together and say, look, guys, SADC has made these recommendations, or SADC has challenged us to come up with a way to come out of this constitutional crisis. What do we do? That's what we did in 2008, and we said, okay, we can talk amongst ourselves as the main political players, and then they brought in Mutambara, Tsvangirai, and Mugabe, and then the outcome of that.
Brother Hope, I think you can continue. Yeah, or if you've landed. Hope, you can unmute and finish your presentation.
Okay, let me just land. So I imagine that after the next sitting in and the processes that will involve SADC, SADC is not going to dictate what the Zimbabwean government and people should do. They can only recommend, and it is up to the Zimbabwean people to come up with a way of coming out of a constitutional crisis. Because I think there are things that we flouted on our own provisions in the Constitution, the Electoral Act, and those things need to be corrected. I thank you. Many thanks.
Thanks, Brother Hope. I think Uncle Jed is having technical issues there. So I think, Carl, you were coming next. Please, if you can take the mic, Carlos.
Okay, good evening all. I'm just, I came up, my brother, just interested in the conversation that Uncle Jed and the Padare were having. For me, it's one of those important discussions to have. And I'm happy. It looks like we have the gurus of understanding these things. Thanks, Anas Matters and the Citizen Z. You continue to educate some of us like me. I don't have the resources to follow and understand right from the sources how these things work. When I say that, I'm talking about maybe reading the SADC protocols word for word and understand how exactly do they. Because one of the things that I think we are faced with, information, disinformation. We are fed false thinking, that which is not reality, from the way of life or the way of things. I guess this is where the ZANU-PF celebration comes from. I saw Nick Mangwana saying, "Did you see this?" And I'm like,
man,
yes, Tiriko.
Oh, and this one, all right, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, but my point is, I think one day if we can have the people who will have the references to say this is what is written there, this is how these things go, I think we'll have a different conversation. Because at some point you wonder, why was there never Mumba documentary if this SADC thing doesn't matter as is portrayed now? Because with this statement, and I'm happy the brother who has just spoken now said, you know, when you read these things, they the SADC was responding to a follow-up twist that they did, and again, no one doesn't know. Even Nevas Mumba, who was accused all over to be a puppet and all that, he did say our duty was to observe, and we did observe. So whatever we reported is not what we made up. We observed and reported what we saw. That's it. So maybe the next question, the big question that must be discussed in one of these days in these streets, is reading from the SADC books and their laws and whatever they call it, statutes and whatever they call it, to say, okay, now that when you have received the report from the observer mission, what do you do with it? Do you just do it for the sake of having records? Or there is something that you have powers to do? Let's understand it from not from the streets, but let's have it from the book where they stand. Because if this is just a matter of just, I don't know, just for the record's sake that we have records that there were elections in Libya, and whosoever robbed the system and then took over the power, and it ends there, then I guess we can as well take up arms and go. Because otherwise, having these things, having these SADC organs and SADC as a body and all that, if they are useless, as far as we are trying, we are Mwanawanyamunhu kuti kadzireza kwetu kuno. Then what's the point of them living? So I'm trying to say, if anyone can help us with a direct reference, reading, giving us the exactly wording, what's the use of SADC? How much power do they have? What exactly? How far do they go? Otherwise, this thing is useless, even if it can speak what we have seen. They have observed and they've spoken what we saw and what we experienced, that this thing was a shame, this thing was wrong. They used the SADC rules, they used the constitution of the country, they used the ZEC a book to say this is where you are. They saw that in all the three, the elections were found wanting in everything. Then when you have said that, then what? Because this talk that you should take this to court, the Zimbabwean court and all that, it still remains the same question. The Zimbabwean court is biased, is not doing the right thing that it must do. All right, these ones are failing. These ones, we are a region. Our neighbors who must come and say, we hate noise. Taking the other men to the other side, trying to bring unity in the family. If they don't have powers to do that, if they don't have in their rules, then what's the use of having them? I'm trying to emphasize the point that I think somebody so please, can you bring forward how far does this SADC thing go? But I want to go back again as my last point. I don't have much. I'm just interested in that. My other point was the conversation that Uncle Jedi had with Padar. I wish that it can come back, and say, because the question was clear, and I don't know whether I missed, but I didn't answer. I think on such we can have your Hulus and your Mofus and stuff, and try to discuss this, such that they, because I am of the view that the ZANU-PF2, they want the SADC report to speak to what they want. What benefit does it have if it doesn't have the biting teeth? If it doesn't, so when you are asked your 2013, your 2008, your 2018 elections, your 2023, if you bring all the reports from SADC, all of them, I want to believe you can pick up similarities or the same lines. One of those examples is the media reform. It has been all over spoken of, and it has slept and forgotten about it. It is known it's going to be spoken of. Then is this what the SADC thing has to do? So why, if SADC, according to ZANU, if it is an important organ that the Zimbabwean as a country is part of, is a signatory to, why are they not working on changing this? I heard Badare saying that's what we want to. But man, you are talking to people that know what you know. You can't claim because we are asked now. When have you ever had a talk openly from your media, pressers as ZANU-PF? We have never said we want ZEC to do this. In fact, what we have seen of late is the ZANU-PF being the spokesperson of ZEC. Nowhere ZEC is found, but ZANU-PF is in defense. So if it is true that the voters' role must be given and all that, and today, Padar, it's only Padar. I'm going to use Padar because it's only him whom I had having a conversation of this nature. It's only Padar who said, we too want this, but he quickly moved. You want to find fault on the other side. Can't you stick to this and find both of us, the opposition party together with the ZANU-PF, the faults that are found with ZEC? Can you not sing the same thing? Because these faults are glaring, they are clear, they are with everyone. Don't you think as ZANU-PF it's good that you two speak the truth that is said by SIOM report? Say that, no, this one was wrong. Pick it also and say it out openly and all, such that we can tell, no, these guys are telling the truth. But otherwise, whatever you are doing now, from whatever you continue to be doing, it only suggests that, yeah. So, but yeah, no, I don't know. But I'm just expressing that I'm a bit of confused. I need those gurus who read too much. Please come teach us here. We are here to learn. Thanks, my brothers. Let me learn for now.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Titus Moff, I had to change, my device. The other one is not responding. So I don't know whether, because, it's running there. So I don't know whether to cut it. If I cut it, will it affect, this one? But I've decided, to just put, the phone away. And I'm now using, the other one. Right. I want to go to the SADC thingy. The SADC Electoral Observer Mission, what they do and who is involved in their operation. But I need to read a little bit on what they do. Right. So let me skip, the bit where they decided, to say that we are going to be observing, election using the 2015, guidelines. But what is important to understand and know is that the member states within SADC committed to uphold the 13 principles for conducting democratic elections. And these include the full participation of the citizens in the political process, freedom of association, assembly, and expression, measures to prevent corruption, bribery, political violence, intimidation, and intolerance, equal opportunity for all political parties to access the media, respect for values of electoral justice, no undue restraints against the opportunity to exercise the right to vote and be voted for, independence of the judiciary and impartiality of the electoral institutions, civic and voter education, acceptance of and respect for the election results by political parties as proclaimed to have been free, fair, transparent, credible, and peaceful by the competent Electoral Commission in accordance with the law of the land, and provision of electoral justice through expeditious settlement of electoral disputes as provided for in the law. So when member countries are inviting the observer mission to come and observe, the elections, they are doing it based on the provisions and based on the undertaking to be upholding these principles for conducting democratic elections in the country. So when we are now looking at those that I've read, and then we look at our election, can we really say that when we conducted our election, we did that following those 13 principles, which we said we are going to be upholding each time that we hold elections, starting from 2018, now 2023, and going, forward. So I think that we need to be that in mind, that these are the SADC principles that we are expected, to hold. So you can take an example of full participation of the citizens in the political, process. Was that achieved, or was that adhered to? Freedom of association, assembly, and expression, was that achieved? Were people allowed to freely associate, to freely assemble, to freely express, themselves? Was there prevention of corruption, bribery, political violence, intimidation, and intolerance? Was FAS involvement going against, this, principle? Equal opportunity for all political parties to access the media. Was that done? Respect of the values of the electoral justice. Was there respect, for that? Any undue restraints? Did we witness that? Were people forced to vote for a candidate that, they did not want? Did we experience that? So we are looking at all these things, and this is the template that, the observer mission, come with. Because us, as a member state, we said we are going to uphold these, principles. So when you come in, and we are promising you that those 13 principles will adhere to each and every one of those, 13, principles. So when we're looking at our situation, is this what was achieved in our election? Dr. Tadini, take the mic, and you are going to be followed by Senor.
No, thank you very much.
I'll give you the opportunity, to speak, but for now, let us go, with that order.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mukoma, opportunity yekuti titaure panyaya iri kupisa iyi. Chekutanga, I think there's a lot that has been said. Some I will respond to, some I will just totally ignore. But I will start by saying, who does SADC talk to? SADC talks to everyone. The fortunate thing is that on the space, there are a lot of us who are pro-opposition and pro-election repeat, and very few that are for maybe the continuation and the legitimization of ZANU-PF. So what has happened, we have made it seem as if SADC is only going to be talking to the opposition. SADC talks to everyone. And in that conversation, we have to realize that there are others who already have an upper hand because of the connection and the time that they've been serving on different boards. And that is the incumbent. The incumbent already has more access to the leaders that make up these different structures to influence them in a lot of ways. So again, why am I mentioning this? So that when we do an analysis and try to understand what SADC can really do for us, we have to remember that. We have to remember that my chances are not so high as compared with my chances of the incumbent. And therefore, we should not pin all our hopes on the institution of SADC, but rather should pin our hopes on ourselves and what we can do for ourselves. The rest of the international bodies will come in depending on what action we would have taken. The same way that the opposition is being listened to Green, SADC is definitely not the same way it is being listened to by the incumbent. The incumbent is already pulling his strings, and we can see that. We can see that by the division that's already there in SADC. Although there is no one who is openly declared for opposition, what we only have right now is assumptions. Since the report says this, and maybe because we have a new political party in Zambia, different from the traditional revolutionary parties, therefore they are supporting us. Apart from that projection that we've put on Zambia, the bulk of the countries so far have indirectly declared for the incumbent. And some have even declared clearly. For instance, Botswana, Tanzania, and Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa. Most recently, with the statements coming from Cyril Ramaphosa. So again, we have to be aware of those things and speak to those things truthfully, so that we know where do our liberties really lie, and where do our chances of success, if there is to be a repeat of an election in Zimbabwe, really lie. They do not lie with these foreign bodies. They lie with us, the people of Zimbabwe, and the actions that we choose to take. I also mentioned, I think I said this yesterday, these organs do not have power outside the member states that make them up. They don't have power outside those member states. So if these member states are not agreeing and are pulling in different directions in the case of Zimbabwe, the body is never going to get to a position where to say, we're intervening in Zimbabwe, this is how we're intervening. We're either intervening by a total embargo of Zimbabwe or some kind of sanction, or we're actually intervening militarily. As long as the different states are declaring for different parties, they will never get to that position. So we have to be aware of that. Then we also have to be aware of disputed elections. We have a lot of disputed elections on the continent right now. The majority of the leaders that are there for the leading countries such as Nigeria, Kenya, are disputed. And they've been disputed in ways that are even more visible than our own. Kukenya vanhu vakabuda murodhi vakazara vakaita sei kuNigeria we saw the guns. We saw what happened in Nigeria. Vamwe vakaenda kunochera road kuti vanhu vasakwanise kuenda kunovhota. But up to today, those presidents that were disputed are there. And we know it. We know they are there even though we have foreign bodies that spoke against the governments. We know they are there even though there are people that were not happy about the election outcomes within those countries. Why again am I pointing out to these issues? Intervention these foreign bodies is not really dependent on the foreign bodies themselves. It is dependent again on the action of the people in that country. And how much they succeed in pushing the government to either come and have a conversation, or how much they suffer, which then forces foreign entities who have interest. Mind you, it has to also be a foreign entity that has interest within that country going in a particular direction. If they have no benefit, if their interests in that country are not challenged by any particular outcome, they won't bother. That's another thing that is into our conversations. To find out good Samaritans that are sitting somewhere, waiting always to say we will speak upon processes being good and being proper, and that's it. No, all of them have hidden interests. We just have to understand which one is more likely to benefit if partner A goes in or if partner B goes into office. And right now, with this globe-trotting that is happening, these are obviously the conversations that are happening. Some of these bodies that should have intervened will not intervene on the basis of what they've been assured one of their interests and their investments are not threatened by the incumbent. Again, that leaves the responsibility of liberating ourselves on the people of Zimbabwe. Did you try to lend I will go Yema disputed elections, Nigeria, Kenya, no interference has happened, even though we saw what happened. I think I've spoken to that. Now, let's go to the actual argument. You could see what was posted by SADC Secretariat. It doesn't matter who's correct, Harakashi, or everyone who's pro-opposition, or Mazizi. Sorry for the terms that I used today. I usually don't use it, but it's to make it more graphic. It doesn't matter who's correct about the argument. At the end of the day, it's all going to depend on what action does SADC end up taking. And that action that SADC is going to end up taking will depend on the pressure that we apply. So it doesn't matter kuti avarakashitoswera tichiti varakashivacelebrata kuti the secretariat yadai, so they will come up or try and say, no, that's not what secretariat means, this is what they mean. It doesn't matter. No matter who wins the argument is not going to be on the basis yekuti ava ndovapa mapoints chaivo kana kuti ava ndovasina kupa mapoints chaivo. It's going to be won on the basis yekuti is there going to be an intervention in Zimbabwe or not? Is there going to be a rerun or not? Is there going to be a government of national unity or a transitional authority or not?
What do you
so
think? As Padare, what do you think is going to happen?
Sorry.
No, sorry, you as Tadini, not Padare. Mira, Padarumbo, Anamkana, Mira, sorry. You as Tadini, what do you think?
What I think is in my... It's in every statement and at the end there's something I'm pushing. If we don't apply pressure, there's nothing that's going to come out of it. SADC can't do anything without us applying pressure internally. If we don't apply pressure internally, that forces the incumbents to come to conversation, there's nothing that's going to happen. You see, their intervention depends. But we're also now looking back out at them. You see, the egg and chicken situation, yet no, the spark has to be internal. And once the spark starts, there's now justification for them to come and say, a conflict up, mediate this particular conflict. Otherwise, this is so far is normal in an election. It's normal. You saw Raila Odinga do that in Kenya. He ran on rallies saying he's the president, gathered people, saying he's the one who's taking charge. Right? That's normal so far. You saw what's his name? Obedience. The obedience in Nigeria. He did the exact same thing. Vapedza election, Mudara apinda, and so Mudara Kakamuke, and then got a inauguration yake. But apedza is obedient, a kind of outside that and Zuto president, I get press statements. To what end? To what end? Are the people of Nigeria now governed by the particular person they wanted? No. Are the people of Kenya now governed by the person?
Another question, on that. I've seen some people that are saying that when you speak of, don't celebrate prematurely when it comes to the recommendations, because there is a full report that is still to be made public, and that report might recommend running of a fresh election in Zimbabwe. Do you see that happening?
No, the time factor in. What they would say if we're waiting for that time factor, I think citizens try to touch on this time issue, and it counts both sides. The time frames, the SADC, and the time frames, our country. You have to put in the time element. If you are given a report 3 months from now that says yes, you have to go back to an election, the willingness or what would have happened in that area in that time, whether it is to quench or to excite for this to become a reality, is the only thing that will determine whether it will happen or not. My recommendations are not pure. My recommendations are follow way in the ground. This is not the first time SADC is giving recommendations after election dispute. In 2018, they gave recommendations. 2013, they gave recommendations. You see? But the issue they put internally, is there enough pressure for those recommendations to be applied? Let us not even go that back. Tinemon Tlante Commission, led by respectable people, they have recommendations. Where are the recommendations now? Because there was no force to push the government to apply those recommendations. So that can come out. Says Congo, and it is open a ballot. SADC said open the ballot, recount. After recount, whatever you do, go to a government of national unity. Do they have a government of national unity now? You see, it is about the internal. What does the internal do that gives SADC power? What does the internal do that forces what they are disputing or the person they are disputing to come to the table and forward or have a conversation? Ndichenda kunolenda, ndachida kunolenda pane issue ye observation ne monitoring. We also have to understand zviri panapa kuti pane issue yeobservation nemonitoring. Army yakauya kunotiona, their mandate is clear. It's an observation mandate. Although after we apply pressure, they can turn it to be a monitoring and even something else beyond. But as it stands, they're an observation mission, not a monitoring mission. The difference is an observation mission will just watch, write down things, present facts, and say, this is what we saw. A monitoring one. Paipa vaitaura kuti machikora mitemo yenyu mega. Vaibva vatostepa ipapo vodoti tamisa election ngatitangidzei. That's the difference between monitoring and observing. You see, so they don't have that mandate as it stands, but they can gain the mandate on the basis of kuti susu foot taitei. So it will not seem like they are creating it for themselves. It is seeming like they've been given that mandate by what will be happening within our country. And so far, as ipo izvozvo asi ndimandudza manje kuti anzi pane ground iri kupreparewa kuti zviitike. So I don't speak.
Inini ndarileya zvakataurwa kuti izvozvi mazuva ari kuteerayo kayo tichaona kuti izotaunganidza masignature akakwana kuita 3 million masignature iyaya nekumobiliza vanhu ende togona kutoita futi a day of prayer yekuti todedzera prayer kuti izo kumasvingo pfugamai kwamutare pfugamai kumandarweni pfugamai mativi mana ese enyika opfugama takananga madokero tonanga ngemabvezuva nenge Jericho yobva yadona yazaakwangwaya mashoko anotaura kuti izvo ndo stage itoripo iko zvinezvi kutotaura kuti vari kutaura neSADC. We are speaking to SADC. Ndo mashoko ari kubudikira yaya. We are preparing an environment, a stage for resistance. Ndo mashoko ari kubudikira yaya. Ndosaka mazonzwa paipa ndakubvunza zedhi kuti izo kana imimi muri kuti izo so far hapana zviripo. But I think stage yatatanga tautaurwa kuti vari kuti vakataura neSADC. SADC vada kunzwisisawo kubva kuopposition kuti ichi chamuda kuti izvo chiitike. Iko zvezvi vakuchiuya kuvanhu manje takuchitaurwa kuvanhu ngimbomera rese ruzhinji rwese vanatoendepi tese tenge taita sei taunganidzwa takunzi izvi ndo mafambiro ataada kuita. Saka ndopaipa pandazobvunza paipa manje nditi saka ipapo havasiripo here panozoya SADC manje yakurova mitigating yakurova whatever it is yanenge yangoita that council yeadvisory council. Izvo handikutaura izvo asi ndinge zvemusoro wangu handimaiziya.
Exactly, and I think you time frames. The time component is also important, but I think if there is such action, then what we are talking about becomes a reality. It has a potential to become a reality. Otherwise, outside that, cannot come to the conclusion. Member states, the roles they play, the division that we are seeing now. Outside that, they can't. You see, I was going to land on the 1 year. Issues. You have that information, and the information of the preparation because you had it from Advocate Nelson Chamisa, the president of the CCC. There's some information that we don't have in the public domain. So it's information that speaks, for instance, to who is the actual victor. ZEC has kept their documents, CCC has also kept their information, then Munhu are totally stepped out of it and says everyone, even if you have those results, you're all talking bollocks and hogwash. You should just go and ban whatever you have. That's the reality that we have right now. So I will never join a camp where I contest with Mnangagwa won or I contest with the Chamisa won. I join a camp where the information and the data that I have. The data that I have is everything that they have cannot be verified and is not valid, given that the whole thing was set up on a faulty premise. And in that speech you are referring to, Chamisa even goes further to add to that. Advocate Nelson Chamisa and says, Chakawina 66% of the MPs, which means what we hold right now as a parliament is in totality not the truth according to him. So we cannot have also a camp Yandojwina. It's okay for people to do that, but I want to make clear what my advocacy is about and what my fight is about. It's about a repeat and whatever time that repeat takes. It's not about installing anyone else because it stands good instrument Shandi. So how can you have a result in instrument is Shandi? Thank you very much, Ugoma.
Right. Thank you very much, for that. But ladies and gentlemen, of course, there's somebody that asked me You're actually a follower and a believer of Nelson Chamisa. I am a follower of a mighty supreme being. I don't follow and believe in a human being. What I do is I look what is going on as a human being in any I analyze news, I analyze the events, I analyze the data, and I follow where this data is going. And when it gets to where it is supposed to go, I can then make up my mind on what that data and what that information is, telling me. That is who I am. That is what I've tried to do, Mupenyu. Some I've always had an argument in anti sometimes you need to just look at what is in front of you, analyze it, and see if it makes sense. As it stands, right now, Nelson Chamisa is saying that he's talking to SADC. Who am I to not believe, or who am I to dismiss him? I take what he says as his gospel truth. That is his truth. And he's letting the people know that that is what he's talking about. That is what is doing. He speaks of getting to a point in time where he's going to be mobilizing people. When I look at that, that is his truth in terms of what he is going to do. What remains to be seen are the outcomes of these processes. And when we see the outcomes of these processes, we make conversations around those outcomes, around those whatever zvinenge zvabuda munema processes ake anenge ari kuita. So sometimes you cannot just dismiss Munhu on the face value, on the face of it, because you never know. Uyataura kuti panogona kunge pane zvimwe zvinhu zviri kuitika that we are not in privy to, but iye chaari kuda iye is looking at considering a rerun of the process. You understand? Because to him, there are certain ingredients that were supposed to be there that were not there. And as a result of the absence of those ingredients, he is at the point whereby he's saying, you know what? This process is what you understand? But for us to get to that process, whether it is going to happen or not, there has to be a process that is initiated and followed. This is the first time, ladies and gentlemen, in our history where we are even talking about a re-election. This is the first time in our history, not a rerun, but we're talking about a fresh election to be held in Zimbabwe. Because this is the first time that whether it is going to be doable or not, nobody knows. I don't know. Vamwe vari kuti hazvisi kuitika vane mareasons avo, vamwe vari kuti izvo zvichaitika vane mareasons avo. I don't know, but I am a learner. I am a person who's prepared to learn the processes and see where these processes take us. So whether those recommendations are going to be recommendations that call for a fresh election, that is something that we are going to see, because I've looked everywhere where where I've gone to try and find out what this recommendation said, but I did not see where the recommendation have said that we need a fresh election. Whether the final ones, maybe the final ones are going to say that, but on the basis of the fact that it was concluded in the Observer Mission report that there are some aspects of this harmonized election that did not conform to the Constitution, the electoral law, and the guidelines of SADC, then one cannot be blamed to say what kind of thing is this. It was from Temo, like what matters is said. As it is, right now we have got somebody who is illegal, who's sitting at the throne. We've got a whole house that is illegal. We've got whole mayors, whole councillors who are illegal because they're a product of an illegal process on the basis of what that report said. So when you are looking at these things, ladies and gentlemen, I know that Kutizo Wangwanu, you might dismiss this and say kuti vatanga vanhu vaya masasika mayatanga. But sometimes there may be a process to some to kurimwe madness so inongoitika so. But anyway, all what I'm saying is something that we are still yet to find out. What we are discussing here is to try and establish what is going on and the truth. Whether we can get to the truth or not, that is an entirely different thing. But let us continue with the conversation. Signoro, I want you to take the mic now, and I want to give a right to Padare, Smarters, and Citizen Z for you guys to come in for the second round. And then after you guys have done the second round, we will then establish a new order. And I will then ask you guys that have spoken to actually drop down so that we can bring in more people. Mkomadani, I've seen you. You are going to be starting the new order together with Anotida, Mkomawangu Ian. But these folks that I'm giving the opportunity to speak now are folks that I want Kutiwataure, and then we will kindly ask them to go. Right. Signoro, take the mic. You're going to be followed by Padare, Smarters, the Citizen Z. And then we start with a new order. That will start with Anotida, Danny, and Ian. And we'll see other people as they join into the conversation. Thank you very much. Signoro, take the mic. Stick to the topic, please. Take the mic.
Yamashisha, Natenda Master. Thank you, host, co-hosts, and fellow Zimbabweans here present. Truly so, we should stick to the topic. Before I make my presentation, allow me to say, I wish these spaces could be declared democratic spaces, or rather freedom of speech spaces, because we have the right to speak freely, and it's part of national development, and it should be exempted from any laws that seeks to suppress our voices. Let me start by saying, Thabo Mbeki, shame on you, my brother, for a reason, not going too much into that, for misleading the innocent souls of Zimbabwe, keeping them hoping. Now, most of us, this is the time that we've been waiting for. But the question is, there's a lot of time wasting, and we're waiting and hoping for something that we can in advance project to say what is the outcome. Tichaita say. And it pains me personally because we are losing, and you are increasing the pain every day. This is the moment that we've been waiting for. Inauguration has taken place. Right. We are dealing with an well-orchestrated crime syndicate here, and there's no politics in Zimbabwe. Very difficult to find one figure to convince me on this one. This is supported by what is happening. We're like kids who are playing on a swing, swing to the left, right, swing to the left, right. The gross effect is Tungo Batkwane Zungu. We end up not understanding exactly what is going on. And that is our stumbling block. We have a situation here where very important, very powerful submissions, which speaks to the role of SADC. as if we don't have submissions. We didn't have submissions even before elections. But what gets us into this stuck mode, where we are stuck in denial mode, I really don't know. We are repeating the same thing over and over again. The role of SADC, which simply means they are there to observe, as prescribed. And it's a membership. It is not the ultimate power. And they don't have an instrument to reprimand any of its members. And that is a fact. And it goes back to my cry to say, so what are we waiting for? We've been waiting, we always wait, and this is not the first time. This is not the first election. It means maybe we are missing something that we are actually discussing to say homegrown solutions, that this is a Zimbabwean problem, a sovereign country problem, which needs the people of the land to decide what they want. Recommendations, I don't think there's need to define that. It's just a recommendation. Observing is just a standalone word, observing. It is what it is. You can put it in this manner, that manner. The whole body, it is there. There are expectations. This is a civil case. It's not a criminal case. There's no criminal codification here. What am I saying? There's no outcome that can be fully determined or effectively determined by the outcome of the SADC, let alone even the United Nations. It's a voluntary thing. It's a civil thing. And again, the question is, why are we taking too long to understand that? Or rather, we understand, but what is it that we are trying to achieve, squeezing water from a stone? Now, here's the thing. We've come to a point where we are pushing ourselves too deep and too hard against the wall, to a point where we become too desperate. And the first cancer is people leaving national affairs, people giving up, hanging their boots. But again, in the spirit of encouraging each other, even if there are 5 people out of 100, they can serve a nation. That to me really, it's just worrying, but it's not really an issue because the struggle continues and we shall conquer. The desperate situation that I'm referring to, which is again being alluded to by Bedia, we should not be desperate to a point of diving into any pool without checking whether it's a pool of blood or what. It can be called SADC or what. And by the way, SADC in all these elections, there are again recommendations. There's no one, styled, approach to governance. There's consensus. There's quite a number. There's dictatorship. There's quite a number. But I think we are limiting our options to one stupid thing. Allow me to say that, which is fixed to a democratic system. It shall not work, and it will not work. So we shall not be pushed. We should not be. We need to guard jealously into a desperate mode of unity of no purpose, unity which is not determined by the people, unity which is determined by the same people that are tormenting us. Hence, we are spending days and months on this basis because of a few individuals, selfish individuals, our political leaders. Then we wake up one day, they tell us they've come up with an outcome which leaves us, isolated, GNU, whichever way you call it. We need to be alert. This is the moment that we need to guard our sovereignty jealously. It's not a joke. We are dealing with a well-orchestrated crime syndicate. The tone tells you, doesn't just suggest, it tells you something is cooking in the background. As I learned, Yamashisha, there's a gentleman called Hope here. He spoke, I thought through you, it would guide our discussions so that we don't we don't keep stuck in the mud, denial of the things that we are hearing every day. He spoke about the recommendations and all that. Monzora, As he suggested, I'm referring to Hope, your guest here or your speaker. If he is to approach SADC or any other body, or even our courts, the whole thing can change, and I see that happening. Could be happening. It could be in the process, and it's inevitable. And like I said, who knows? It's a well-orchestrated crime syndicate. We are yet to find out who he really is, Monzora, whatever it is. So what he said to me got me thinking. It will change. So he's the person who can say, and Chamisa's claim, which is just a claim at this stage, officially, we don't have anything that suggests that he's got a claim. It is just but a claim, and it's not yet official. That's one thing that we need to be very clear about. It can change the narrative. Sakati Chaita say, understand me when I say it's a well-orchestrated crime syndicate. They sit down, plan A, B, C, D. They've got an endless list of things that they will come up with. And again, they use the democratic system, which makes you porous, makes you stupid, makes you humble, orderly, protocol, and it's time wasting. Here we are through that systematically and in that chronological order. We've been waiting patiently. We shall wait, and nothing will happen. And the Tishingo Uzwa Tishango Ukura. So now, this is the thing. There is need for us as Zimbabweans to decide what we want. But we can't decide. Nedzungura tinaro, randi inaro inini. Rawi inaro iwe tatinaro mazimbabweans. Where probably we can hire a consultant. Pane vane mashiripiti ekuunganidza mari. Chimbotiunganidzai mari mutipo independent consultant. He will probably give you a clear analysis of who we are as Zimbabweans. The one time we're talking of a revolution, one time we're talking of a democratic system which is failing us. One time we want to jump into the same course that we know they are captured. So we need to sober down. Zvinowanikwa kana wabatwa nedzungu unogara pasi. Wagara pasi, you think better. Anything I say, it is not meant to make somebody collapse, but it's inevitable, it's coming. We are coming again to another dead end where we'll be locked outside by these political leaders. And they'll celebrate, enjoy celebration, they'll move on. It doesn't matter, we may love Chamisa or what, it's inevitable. There are recommendations from external forces. And the bad time as well, back, in the best interest of which people? Which people? Don't we know which people they are referring to all the time? Don't we know that they purport they want to save nations, and yet they do everything in the best interest of them? Them, only them. I would like to yield my mic, Nyamasisha, but I hope one day we'll have somebody to redirect us and say, okay, where do you go? So that Shaita says continuous and victory guaranteed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Right, I want to go to Padaradona, but anyway, let me go to Smarters and then Citizen Z. You follow, and then we'll go with the new lineup, that I've announced. So so take the mic, please, Smarters.
Thanks, Uncle Jed. I've got nothing to add, man. Maybe if you could allow the other guy, yes.
Right, okay. Citizen Z?
I think Uncle Jed.
Yeah, I know I did cut you, midway. If there's anything else, that you wanted to add to your presentation, now is the time.
Thank you. This is what I want to add. As people, we might have things that we like, things that we do not like. As individuals. But when we're dealing with a nation, then you're dealing with governments, then you're dealing with bodies of other governments that are outside, that are looking into, let's say, good example becomes Zimbabwe. They do not care what you like or not. You've got sets of behavior. I'll repeat, sets of behavior that you need to, what's the English word? Express. And if you don't express those sets of behavior, to them, everything is kosher. Everything is okay. Whether you like the set of behavior or not, that is how they determine that you are uncomfortable. That's how they determine that you are not happy. That's how they determine that you do not give legitimacy to a process that you went through like a month ago. And these sets of behaviors have to be done at the right time. And that time is not chosen by you. It is chosen by the natural reaction that is therefore expected of anyone who's aggrieved. Now, SADC, let's say SADC fits to AU, AU fits to EU, EU fits to UN. They all fit to each other. When SADC was creating the prevention model that they have now, they were working with AU because AU has a long-standing model. When AU was doing its own model, the same model, they were looking at UN because UN has the longest model. So UN comes in and teaches AU, EU, EU goes to AU, and then EU jumps AU again and goes to SADC. Yeah. If you look at the two, the two booklets are practically the same. Why? Because they're dealing with human beings everywhere else in the world. We go through an election that is flawed, and we do not behave because it was flawed. It was not only flawed in the election day, it was flawed pre-election day. We do not behave like people that have seen a flawed experience or an unconstitutional thing. So we behave unnatural. That means we are good with this thing. We go through the process of it, still not turning around and using, because when something turns around and looks at us, it says, okay, you got freedom of association. That's what your constitution says you've got. Yes, your government can be oppressive, but even so, you have to turn around and show. Yeah, because what your government says up there is not we are oppressive. It does not say that to SADC or any other country. Zimbabwe has never gone outside of the world or interacted with anyone and said, hi, my name is E.T., I run Zimbabwe and we're an oppressive government. It has never said that. It says we're a democratic government. We observe the right of freedom to associate, freedom to demonstrate, freedom to protest, all those things we observe. So they turn around and say, tick box, tick box. Yet they acknowledge that, okay, there are some instances, this is when now diplomatic talk comes in. There are some instances where the government is overstepped, yeah, or held with a stronger hand when it's supposed to turn around and just nudge a bit. They acknowledge that recommendations come in, government of Zimbabwe turns around and says, okay, we're going to turn around and fix them. But let's move on to this one. We get to an election after all the unconstitutionality of it, and it's a disaster. Again, we do not react like a people that have seen a disaster. We chill. We propaganda ourselves in lies. that what you are doing is okay. And it was wrong. It was wrong in pre-election, was wrong at the election. Now here's a problem. We come into the post-election. Again, a narrative is put in. And I've always questioned this narrative, even my own party. The narrative of saying we're in dialogue with the international observers or SADC. There is nothing like that, people. You write a letter to SADC, they will refer you, acknowledge the letter, and refer you back to the preliminary statement. They will not tell you anything else that they have not told. They have not even, the full report has not even tabled to SADC. Why would they tell you about the full report? So they will leave it there. They will refer you to what has been published already. They come in, elders, advisory council, they come in and talk to you. That is not a dialogue. That is them trying to understand what is going on here with you. How are you feeling? That cannot be therefore called a dialogue. Because for it to be called a dialogue, you have to turn around and say to yourself, and what is your leverage in these discussions? And at that moment in time, we have not put in any leverage because there's nothing happening. Something that we should have been doing since the day Chikumba turned around and released that thing was to turn around and protest, yet most people turned around and thought that was a bad idea. You should have protested before elections, election day, election thing, and you still think it was a bad idea. We move on, Uncle Jade. 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or in 4th week now. There is nothing on the ground in Zimbabwe. Nothing whatsoever. Now, the people that were thinking that they were dialoguing, yet they knew that they were just being asked how they feel as a procedure after an election that seems to have disputes, are starting to understand now that they were not dialoguing. And what they should have done was to turn around and react naturally so that a dialogue can be put in. Now, the problem we have now is time. The chances of that are reducing every single day since the election day. They've been reducing. They do not wait for you. And SADC turns around and goes on its own procedures to say, what are we seeing on the ground here? This is why when you are reading the procedures for the advisory committee uncles or advisory council, it speaks of a reaction, the people's reaction, yeah, stakeholders' reaction. It refers that to be a conflict. Yeah. And how does it look at it as a conflict? It looks at it, this thing here has been set up, results have been put in, people are not happy. They turn around and therefore express themselves according to their own constitution. That SADC turns around and therefore promotes, yeah, freedom of association and all those things to happen. And then it acknowledges. Now, this is when it gets dark. It gives you examples of when the government, when it sees this, reacts and causes violence. And then it gets even darker to show you how SADC looks at you and me. It gives you numbers, examples of countries that have gone through this, and it puts in the numbers of dead bodies. Actually gives you numbers, 149. Yeah? It gives you numbers, 70-something, 50-something. And then it turns around and talks of those numbers to say, this is when we come in now. Yeah? We tried the prevention. Now we mitigate now we manage. To do that, you have to go back again to 2008 and say, how did 2008 so-called GNU happen? It was not because of the initial, what people think of negotiations. No. It was the reaction of the people to this event and the clashing between the government forces and the people on the street that turn around and put legitimacy. And when they clashed, then the talk starts. And what was the leverage? The leverage was the people on the ground. That in order for this thing to solve this thing very quick, you have to come into an agreement that will turn around and stop what is happening here. Now, if there is no people on the ground or outside, and we are lying to each other, SADC sees it like any other election. It sees it like Zambia. It sees it like Namibia. It sees it like Lesotho. It sees it like South Africa. It will move on.
Right.
Because let me finish up with this angle. At the end of the day, guys, SADC is trying to build towards a democracy. Yeah, this is why it gives recommendations. It understands the countries it's dealing with. It's not an illusion about Zimbabwe, whatever. It knows. But it says to Zimbabwe, as long as you seem to be moving and acknowledging the correction, we'll keep on doing this. Because what SADC has is an unlimited year. Yeah, unlimited years. It can do this for the next 50 years. That's how projection they go. But you and me do not have that.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Padari, take the mic.
Yeah, I think now we are coming to senses now. You know, I've always said many people will regret why the left is structured institution means FDC. And my predictions are still right. So if I was to say who can change, right? I know the election is done, ZANU-PF has moved on. So if there was anyone who had the probability of changing, you know, this election, if they had the willpower to do so and the strength to do so, it's only Douglas Munhu and no one else. And that's a fact. And that's a fact for where the journey has gone now. Because to SADC, he's probably the only person who they could listen to, because he will point at the structures that he had and say, these were my structures. You know, I had the strongest party, I had the biggest party, I was in parliament, and I did not go for this election because of this. You know, if there's anyone who could, you know, possibly put up a fight to SADC, despite what he said, you know, in terms of battle plan and battlefield, where, you know, when you push for a negotiation, everybody will ask you what's at the table. You know, saying I've got so much numbers, or I've got, I think I did my own tally and I've got these numbers, it doesn't work anyway. You know, in terms of, you have to compare them to your constitutional processes. But in terms of escalation of force and de-escalation of force and negotiation pathway, you know, obviously what it is articulated, because you're forcing another hand by another means. So that could be a possible, you know, possible hand, you know, but it's something that I would never advocate, because for me, I think, you know, we're doing quite well with the building of our democracy. So for me, you know, we are now coming to senses on this now. I think in a few weeks' time, very few people will be questioning the right person and asking why they let them down. And that's where we're going to go to. At the moment, we're still in some denial. You know, because what should be, I think what should anger more people is being told that I have you have a 2/3 majority and we are out of government. I think for me, it's an insult of our thinking capacity as a people, you know, because it invalidates everything that everybody was battling here, and those that had hope and then giving their money towards that cause to say, look, you're not as clever as you think. I am the clever one here, and that's what it sounds to me, you know. But again, who am I? I'm just a padari, someone who akapinda basinde kumanya. So yeah, and I'm willing to let. But I think Ago Gerard, this is coming to an end. Because what is talking about, I don't think there's energy on the ground because people are already celebrating and being told that they've got 2/3 majority. That's not going to produce anything, and we have people who are already taking part in parliament and they've validated the election, and the election is gone. So to me, if from a strategic position of honesty, if someone was to ask me as a man of honesty and integrity, you'd ask me, who could, if SADC was to listen to anyone, if SADC was to listen to anyone, and I'm saying if SADC was to listen to anyone, it might listen to Monzora, but not anybody else, because at the end of the day,
but Badare, why would SADC listen to somebody who
yeah,
doesn't, because Monzora did not participate, in this election. He pulled out.
it's like someone saying,
No. Listen, he pulled out, right? He cited the reason why he pulled out is because he said that 87 of his members were denied by ZAC to come into this election, right? So he was pulling out in solidarity, of that. And if you look at the report, the report speaks to the inability of ZAC to actually, to actually, run, this election. So, but there's one who ran in this election, and him offering competition to Emerson Mnangagwa led to these issues that became apparent and that became clear
but let me
to the observers that Zeke was doing this. So to me, So the question, to me, to you is, surely Monzora coming into the mix, which I'm not trying to downplay, but it adds to the evidence that condemns Zach and everything that has happened.
Okay,
not
good question.
The other way
It's
around.
A good question. Now let me answer you this way. When every other person you see on there, right now, I'm just going to go by your assumptions or presentation that is done by the opposition. Every other person who contests besides Chamisa, they say is a ZANU-PF proxy, isn't it? So that way now, if you then reverse that thinking and say everybody who partook in that from your own opposition narrative is a ZANU-PF light, including Chamisa. So the only person who did not participate, who had a genuine position from challenging the delimitation report, they went then no, my people are being subjected to this, is only Monzo. The rest of the people went on to fight and say, look, we are so if the only person who can say right now in Zimbabwe everyone is ZANU-PF light, including Chamisa, is Monzora. If the narrative of the opposition is to be respected in the context of the way you put it across, if you have to think of it in the way you present it to everyone else, today is the day you start thinking and saying, anyone else who participated in ZANU-PF, as you blame, is a ZANU-PF light. And the only person who did not is Monzora. Because he took a court case, he also retracted when he thought his people were being subjected to certain things by Zek.
Yeah, but if we go with with the report, the preliminary, report, it also speaks to the issues of the nomination fees, and these are some of the issues that led to Monzora's people not being, registered or not being, nominated. Subsequently leading. Subsequently leading to him, Monzora, making a decision to stand in solidarity, with his people. So the point that I'm trying, to make here, the issues that you are raising about Monzora being, the only credible. No, it's not the only credible. Monzora is an additive to what is already there in terms of the condemnation of Zeki being an unsuitable player to be running elections in Zimbabwe.
Again, according to the narrative that is given by the opposition, listen, I'm talking in the speeches of your narratives from the opposition side, right?
But
Monzora is the only person
I'm speaking
who
to the observer report, which is the topic.
Wait, it is going to answer Monzora's story again. Let me tell you how it's going to answer Monzora's story. Monzora is the one who was stopped from paying because there was issues with certain systems in Zimbabwe, according to what he says. So again, it answers Monzora. It does not answer anyone else because everybody else managed to pay the way they paid. But Monzora was actually then saying, look, I did not pay. The court, he actually took it to court and he was told, oh, your money was for this and this. And again, he brings another case to the court of law to say my people have been subjected not to pay. And I'm just trying to talk from, when you analyze the battlefield, one thing about the military battlefield is you have to appraise the opposition or your opponent. Because if you don't appraise your opponent, you're bound to miscalculate and you're going to get casualties. So what I've just done there, I've appraised the battlefield from the opposition side and said, who has a credible position? Because what ZT was producing did not happen. The people on the ground were not agitated. They did not do anything, and we've got.
You are trying to say that you see you are coming from a position of trying to divide. The opposition, because this election was said, to be an election that was proud, and as a ZANU-PF person now, it's just a way of you coming in and trying to say the divide with the opposition.
Me being ZANU-PF. I'm talking like an opposition right now.
Push back there?
Forget about me being
right. Push back.
Yeah, all right. Nyamashisho, I think combining the two views from Padar and Zeti has brought in something which is very critical, and some of us we've been there. You can write to the top, but issues of jurisdiction, it has to be referred downstream, and that's critically important. So it's an arrangement which is there, but then we make up things in our head. I hear your sentiments where you're coming from, Sekruangu. Of course, it's politics, but there
no. You also mentioned
hold on. No, let me speak.
Hold on. Chill. So I hear the political sentiments and mileage, but there's truth in it. There is absolute truth in it. Shakarongwa Chinichi, if you listen to what Padare is saying, he may not be saying that. What is the role of Monzora right now?
He has got no role. He's just sitting there.
No. What I'm saying is his role is what Hope said. It's sort of synchronized with what Padare is saying. So again, it rallies with what Zeti said. You can write, but they refer you down. Issues of jurisdiction, because if they don't do that, they're actually breaking their own rules, and the appetite is not there. The situation on the ground, from an observer viewpoint, is that we are chilled, we are not affected, and it is the people that matter. And what is our situation? Does it suggest that we are aggrieved? No. Many thanks.
Right. Thank you very much for that. You know what? Let us move on. I want to bring in Anotida. Right. Yeah, Anotida. I think we need a female voice here. Or a change.
He's male.
Huh?
He's a male. Or
really?
Or maybe they are they.
Oh, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it. What? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mkomongo. Sorry.
Okay. Is that me?
Yeah, sorry, Mkoma. Sorry, I thought I was looking at a totally different Anotida. But
don't worry.
Yes, I want to apologize. Yeah, thank you.
We are living in a world of sexual fluidity.
Thanks,
Mkoma. An issue. Okay, right. I just want to bring in a slightly different perspective. so that we bring life to this discussion. Thank you. I also speak to the topic that is there. Number one, Triple C did not act democratically with regards to a decision whether or not to go to court. If they consulted few, and they delayed justice to overturn the election legally and professionally. That's number one. Number two, the opposition parties, this has nothing to do with the Triple C, though Triple C played a bigger role. The opposition parties did not read into Ngonzora's attempts. And as a result, they were stepping on the opportunity available even for SADC to come in. Yet the elections being postponed according to the petition from Ngonzora, SADC was going to come in and set up a transitional authority. ZANU-PF was shaking, if not giving in to the petition from Douglas Ngonzora. That is the reason, evidence, that is the reason why they went to an election without a manifesto. Because they believed that people were going to go in favor of reforms. Reforms on electoral laws in the land, reforms on the delimitation report, and the reforms on peaceful elections, hence the results of credibility. Before I go ahead with my submission, let me give great acknowledgement to Dr. Tadini and the Smarters. I don't want to repeat what they said. I wholly agreed with them. I would like to help them not to be apologetic and appear to be partisan. It actually affects their presentation. Let me proceed on my trajectory. Right. What is available now? I am very happy with Chamisa. He knows how to stage his political agenda. It's almost 15 to 16%, which is left for the leadership of the opposition to remain wanting. And the Chamisa is timely coming in, which is correct. What is SADC looking at? SADC has been let down by the opposition political parties of Zimbabwe. What was the time frame for SADC to come in the help? Between the beginning of the election, which is the announcement of election date, and the coronation of the president. Those days were very rich, fertile for SADC to come and intervene. The opposition missed a big chance there. Right now, the opposition is only left with one argument, the political one. If Zimbabwe's political environment reaches a stalemate, SADC will have to come in. But they are not going to come in and overturn an election because there is no instrument. Secondly, SADC's framework of decision-making is that which promotes peace in the region, first and foremost. Right. Who are the biggest stakeholders in SADC that are likely to influence this election and actually the cry of the opposition? We have South Africa and the other brothers around. South Africa has already put an icing on the opposition's argument. Why am I saying that? They advised the opposition to follow the processes internally. Opposition did not. The preliminary report pointed to some elements. The statement some elements is going to affect the argument of the opposition. And thirdly, the SADC is going to come up with the final report. And that final report, amongst other things in recommendations, regardless of when that report is going to come, is to reform, capacitate the institutions of democracy, and have impartiality from the judiciary. Those are some of the recommendations that are likely to come. will the government take those recommendations in the interest of legitimizing themselves? They will grab them and they concede that they need to have those reforms. But that's a challenge for 2028. Given the hypothesis of spiritualism, prayers, and believing in what God can do, honestly, I can't even put an argument against that. But looking at all the legal instruments available, we are left with politicking on the ground, right? There is also a comment I wanted to give. This is a comment about the post-election period. Post-election period is between when the election results are declared to the coronation of the president. Politics would have come in and flood themselves, denying the results to an extent that coronation would have been difficult, irrespective of not going to court. This did not happen. Ladies
So,
and
Koma, are you saying that
with
the
my
9
greatest
days?
and highest
Mire,
esteem,
Koma, are you saying that the 9 days to the day that Emerson Mnangagwa was inaugurated, those are the crucial days that something needed to happen?
for a SADC report, any period outside that, SADC would be interfering.
But SADC says they've got up to 30 days for them to prepare a report. So right now I think we've gone full circle to the day of the election. So anything that happened up to almost now, are you saying that if SADC had gone past the 90 day, there would be
But not 30 days in the streets of Harare and the Uzumba Maramba Pumbe. They are in the office.
Right, okay.
So whatever report they are going to be given now of someone being abducted and so on and so forth, he has an institution of police to go and report. So when we look overall, when we look at the position of the opposition now, they are left with holding the center. Push hard on petitions. What are those petitions for? For reforms, not to overturn the government. Any efforts to overturn the government from now, they are treasonous, and the treason will be invoked. I thank you.
Right. I think anyway, since you say that you are bringing in a fresh air to this conversation, let me see how that fresh air holds. But thank you very much for that. Let's hear what others speak to Mkomadani. Where are you, Mkomadani? Yeah, Mkomadani ovadona vaenda ningi vaenda kuma listeners. But anyway, Mkoma Ian.
Moshe, uncle. say pa talk show mama different ideas.
The last speaker has actually brought in something that is totally different from from what we were talking about here, and he's now speaking to now where we are in a period whereby to him it's now the post election. Everything that happens now cannot be tied to the to the election. How far do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, you see, the previous speaker tried to come from a legalistic perspective. However, I can tell that he's not legally trained, because there is no legal matter that is not curable at law. Ndosaka ma courts aripo kuna nyaya inonzi kana 9 days dzapfuura haichanswi wiki. that jurisprudence does not exist anywhere. But anyway, I wanted to perhaps start my contribution from a factual perspective, and then of course I'll bring my interpretations to that. So if you bear with me, one of the important questions that we probably need to dispense with pertains to what are the covenants that bind the member states within SADC. and what is the legal efficacy of the recommendations that are then given, and how are disputes handled within the context of the tribunal. So I'm going to discuss just a couple of frameworks there, and then proposition two options or two pathways that are available, that I think that Chamisa, being a legal mind with his team, have probably been, distilling and looking at. So if we start at the beginning, and I'll rewind before SADC, and start by giving us context with regards to the events of 2002. And I'm sure most of us will remember that that was the time when Zimbabwe was suspended from the Commonwealth. And they were suspended from the Commonwealth because they failed to adhere to the Harare Declaration. Okay, so this was a Commonwealth declaration that was actually, coined within our own jurisdiction that held to specific principles that all the member states signed to adhere to. And when it was found that they failed to adhere to that, they were suspended, of course, in 2002. And of course, we all know our previous president and his very illustrious a commentary, akabva aramwa, and Zimbabwe then resigned the subsequent year. I think that was in 2003. So just to give you a perspective that when nations come together, they are not there as a tea party, as some might want to suggest. But in actual fact, the relationships are governed by treaties and covenants that have a legal efficacy. And where those treaties and covenants are not adhered to, there are consequences up to and inclusive of suspension and or expulsion from that grouping. That's just to lay the context. So now when we come to the SADC treaty, and before I get to the SADC treaty, I want to deal with the legal position with regards to the actions of President Zuma in terms of stripping away certain aspects in terms of jurisdiction of the tribunal, because some of us still have the position that that still holds. But I will read a constitutional case where that was dealt with. Okay, so coming to the what we call the treaty itself, and dealing with, I think it's Article 18. So from Article 16 all the way down to 18 deals with the jurisdiction of the tribunal. In other words, the body that hears disputes, and what kinds of disputes can it hear, and what is the efficacy of their rulings. Okay. From Article 16, subpoint 1 says, subject to the provisions of paragraph 2 of this article, the tribunal shall have jurisdiction to give preliminary rulings in proceedings of any kind and between any party before the courts or tribunals of states. Second point, the tribunal shall not have original jurisdiction, but may rule on a question of interpretation, application, or validity of the provisions in issue if the question is referred to it by a court or tribunal of a state for a preliminary ruling in accordance with this protocol. And then Article 17 now deals with disputes between states and community. Okay? And it states, subject to the provisions of Article 14 of this protocol, the tribunal shall have exclusive, and we need to be clear here, exclusive jurisdiction over all disputes between the states and the community. Such disputes may be referred to the tribunal either by the state concerned or by the competent institution or organ of the community. And then Article 18, disputes between natural or legal persons and community. This is now at an individual level. One was talking about the issue of court matters and it being almost like an appellate court that can give a legal opinion with regards to issues pertaining to legal matters in member states. The second one is talking about it being a place of first instance where a community, a gathering of people, whether via a church organization or a political party, can actually take a matter to it. And then Article 18 deals with an individual. Subject to the provisions of Article 14 of this protocol, the tribunal shall have exclusive jurisdiction over all disputes between natural or legal persons and the community. Such disputes may be referred to the tribunal either by the natural or legal persons concerned or by the competent institutional organ of the community. Now, we know that during the tenure of Jacob Zuma being the chairperson of SADC, he sought to amend Item 3, Article 18 of the jurisdiction of the tribunal. And of course, they did put an amendment which meant that, for example, and this was precipitated by the commercial farmers individually taking their matters to the courts, and when they started to win, it became his mandate to rewrite that Article 18. However, in 2020, a court case on a constitutional matter that was brought before the Constitutional Court of South Africa by the Law Society versus, of course, President Jacob Zuma and the SADC tribunal judgment. So in other words, they took this matter in terms of its constitutionality to the Constitutional Court of South Africa, and it was actually deemed that the president, one, had acted outside of the Constitution of South Africa, and therefore his actions in as far as varying the mandate of the tribunal with regards to Article 18 were actually unlawful. We'll talk about the implications of that case later, because I understand that there are many people that want to contribute. So coming to the point of what then are the options. Here we have seen SADC clearly stating the parameters of their electoral observation mission, which is one, to observe, and then to provide recommendations based on their observations. And I'm sure many have looked at the different permutations of what a recommendation may or may not include. Here's where we find ourselves in a bit of a, how do I call it, a cul-de-sac. Because where you have how do I call it, panoita my recommendation that asingabai pamoyo is when you have not truly violated your own laws and your own constitutional provisions. And this, to me, is the most worrisome pointer in the preliminary report of SADC. Why do I say that? Because all of these reports have legal efficacy, because at some point in time, that becomes from a preliminary to a final report, which is then signed off by the Troika on elections, and it takes on the legal persona of that document. What does it mean? It means that an election in a member state has been done ultra vires and in direct violation of its own laws. It therefore cannot be deemed as legal. And I point you to Article 16, was it 16 or 17 that I read first, which talked about the tribunal acting in more or less as an appellate court in terms of interpreting the validity of cases and case law and adjudicating in matters that may even have been adjudicated by a constitutional court of a country. This is the far-reaching nature of the legal parameters. Tanzwisanaka anotida kuti it's not 9 days. It's actually a setup, structure, and process, and nothing precludes the tribunal from hearing a matter. Now, how can a matter then be heard? Let's presume one of two options. The recommendations are just as they are, recommendations. Improve this and improve that, which consequently, I would say the ZANU-PF supporters, and shall I even go as far as saying prognosticators, would prefer that type of option. That one is rather simple. It's a case of, okay, fine, we've heard you. This is our strategy in terms of addressing that. The other one, which is glaringly obvious, given the wording of the preliminary report with regards to the violation of our own laws and constitution, would have to cure that statement, which would mean that there must be an interpretation of the legal standing point of the legitimacy of an election that is conducted outside and in direct violation of the country's laws. And that we will get to a point where we can prognosticate as much as possible, but it is a permutation that is possible. And in that context, it would then open up what is called a legal Pandora's box, which, of course, this is the ideal scenario for the opposition. And might I go as far as saying the opposition prognosticators? So I've given a balanced view. So this idea of a one-track pony, I think it's one, ill-advised. It's ill-read. Kutaura tisina kuverenga. Kutaura tisina kuita an objective exegesis.
Can I quickly ask you? You are making reference to the tribunal. Is it the same tribunal that was said to have been disbanded after it made a ruling pertaining to the issues that were brought before it by the white farmers in Zimbabwe? Is this same tribunal now? And if it is, that was disbanded. What it ruled before? I mean, will it still be? Are those issues still issues that can be taken into consideration now? Do they form precedent?
Yeah, okay. So Gerard, what I was explaining is that Article 18 was the one that Zuma amended. In other words, he closed the court to hearing petitions, or the tribunal to hearing petitions of individuals. You understand? Now that decision has been overturned by the Constitutional Court in South Africa, which invalidates, because the Constitutional Court made a ruling against the president and the SADC tribunal as well with regards to the unlawfulness of the barring of hearing matters that are brought to it by individuals. However, Article 16 and 17 still hold. They can still hear a matter that is brought by a community or representative thereof, which a political party falls under.
So are you saying the tribunal in its construction still exists?
Yes, 100%. There is no... Ask yourself this, Gerard. If there's a dispute between the nations, how is it going to be handled without a tribunal? Who is the custodian of the treaties and the covenants that are signed by the member states? So we need to be very clear when we say the tribunal was disbanded. It was not. The case is very clear, and I'll post them here, that it was with regards to Article 18, with allowing the farmers kuti vauye nema-cases directly to the tribunal. Do you
think Chabisa is this complicated the way you are reading? If you knowing what was from nations from last time, it's complicated.
Don't worry, nchamfona manje manje. Totomfona manje manje.
Right, because you know what, the reason why I've asked about, the, tribunal, because it is something that is constantly thrown in our faces when we speak about,
Vanonyeba, Gerard.
SADC, we always get this, I don't forget that we forced the disbandment of the tribunal when they, ruled against Zimbabwe on the issue of the white farmers. So that thing, it shows how powerful, ZANU-PF or Zimbabwe is, or was at, at the time. And this is where now this issue of us walking away can still be thrown, in our faces to say it's a voluntary organization. We can always walk away anyway.
No, it's not. Please, that is one of the things that I heard being said. And that's why I wanted to correct it. Kuti kana tasainirana magwaro ndikatanga neku Commonwealth. The reality is that if you run roughshod of those treaties and those covenants, the reality is unosuspendwa kana utochakikwa out, and that has its consequences directly on trade and economy.
So in a nutshell,
thank you very much for that.
David,
Here, you follow our rules. If you don't want to follow our rules, exit the platform pronto. You follow our rules. I repeat, you follow our rules here. And one of the rules is you wait to be given the chimuti if you have not spoken. Titus, Torrens. Move. Torrens, one moment. Right. It seems as if Mofar with Dambudziko. Right. Saka iko zvinezvi. Regai ndimbodzoka kuna Dr. Tadini. Dr. Tadini, can I give you 3 minutes to talk, and then indozotaura who's coming on next, who should be Mkoma Sixpence. Dr. Tadini, are you there? Right, you seem not to be there. Sixpence, can you take the mic, please?
Thanks, Uncle Jedza. Just confirm if you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Uncle Jedza, I just wanted to comment on, just to tie up a few things that Ian has said and some of the previous speakers have said. Now, Ian was alluding to, treaties and laws that govern, our African countries, particularly SADC. And I just wanted to say, Kuti, one thing that we should be wary of is, applying the law as is written down in Africa. And we know, Kuti, that is particularly not the case. Laws in Africa are made to serve, not for justice. And I'll give you a few examples of where these laws have failed us. If you look at when the Hawks started investigating Jacob Zuma, who was the sitting president, they were completely disbanded. Then you look at the intricate relationship and camaraderie that exists between our ruling parties in SADC. They've got very well-entrenched relationships. They serve one another. And if you look at what happened during the coup in Zimbabwe, where Robert Mugabe was deposed of the presidency, initially there were indications that SADC was going to intervene. They sent a team to Zimbabwe on a fact-finding mission. And when it turned out, Kuti, that coup was deemed an internal ZANU-PF succession process, immediately everyone, including SADC, backed off. And they allowed that what purportedly, in quotes, was a ZANU-PF succession to occur. Saka, that shows you, Kuti, in SADC, and particularly in Africa as well, these laws that sometimes we invoke and we read, they are applied partisanly, and they're applied where they suit those people in power. Saka, in my case, I don't want to particularly fall back onto laws or onto treaties because they are meaningless without political will. And in many cases where it is leaders against their people, it means that political will is not there because as citizens we are powerless. Right. Now I'm also going to talk about like what happened in the Zim election. And just to add a bit of context, like, I am anti the status quo. I am anti the ZANU-PF hegemony. Not because I hate ZANU-PF, but because I am progressive in the sense that it is leadership renewal, constant leadership renewal that leads to development of a nation. New ideas, new perspectives, and passing on the baton. So leadership renewal, whether within ZANU or outside ZANU, is what I advocate for. Now, if you look at, what I said earlier on, Kuti, a lot of these ruling parties and countries at government level, they work together on various initiatives, some which are above board and some which are underhand. Saka, they only get involved in internal matters of a country when they see the tide is turning against the incumbent. Because it is very difficult for even the government of South Africa to get involved in Zimbabwe internal matters, whether through SADC, whether through any platform that exists in a way that undermines ZANU-PF. Because should anything happen that ZANU-PF retains power, it means they have soured the relationships. Saka, all our ruling parties that constitute SADC, they are very wary of getting involved up until Vaona Kuti, the tide is turning against the incumbent. And if I then come back to CCC, I do not think they did enough to prove to any of the ruling heads in SADC, Kuti, you know what, we have got a potential to unseat ZANU-PF. And by so doing, creating leverage for them to, invoke some sort of dialogue, which can either lead to a GNU or a national government or whatsoever. So I think that is lacking. Now you go back to when SADC facilitated talks in Zimbabwe. That was, just the talks that precipitated the GNU, Tsvangirai and Mugabe. Now, how that became to be is Tsvangirai outright won by 44%, or I think it was 46%, against a lower value, Robert Mugabe and his political party. Saka then, they had shown Kuti, Tsvangirai had essentially won the election, and the runoff, it was untenable what came out of it. And that is when SADC came. And even when they came, what they fostered was actually to the benefit of ZANU-PF. So I think, Kuti, as much as we want change, we need to be cognizant of the fact of, the merits that facilitate that change. And I don't think Kuti CCC has managed to achieve even 10% of what is needed in Zimbabwe to achieve change without necessarily going through, an armed resistance struggle, which I think a lot of us agree that is off the table, right? What do I think? Because a lot of people say, we bash, CCC, not understanding the conditions that, manifest in Zimbabwe, and we should also proffer solutions, right? Firstly, I would like to say, I'm not a politician. So some of the things that we proffer as solutions might not be solutions, but, they come from lay persons. But I think CCC should essentially play dirty when it comes to politics. And akuna munhu asina a prize. And what I mean by that is even the people that are enablers in ZANU-PF, CIO, FAZ, and so forth, those are people who are doing it not because they love ZANU-PF, but because there is something in it for them, for their families, right? You look at Anawenje, Wakapuwa Motkari Nana Wicknell, and that guy DJ Masomera Akapuwa Motkari a few days ago, right? And that has become the patronage system which ZANU-PF, which drives them, which keeps them in power. And knowing CCC has to their disposal a lot of financial power that comes from the diaspora, I feel they are playing too clean given that their opponent plays dirty. And I think they should compromise the system. They should be ahead of the curve in terms of intelligence. They're not investing in intelligence. They're not investing in double agents that exist, like within the political party. Saka, from my perspective, I think the CC should do more to undermine the system by playing the system. Use money to buy the judges. Use money to understand how are the judges going to rule. Use money to actually infiltrate Faz Yoyo and create conditions that become untenable, for ZANU-PF. That said, Uncle Jeds, I'm going to return it back to the floor again, and I'll sit this one out and, look forward to a rebut.
Right. Thank you very much, for that. Right. Mkoma, right, the issue of, the, tribunal, I've looked, at it, and, right, from what I can gather, this is where now another question, that I'm going to bring up now. Sorry, I need to bring up, a question, pertaining, to that. Because I've looked at what Mkoma Ian, has spoken to, or has spoken about on the issue of the tribunal. Yes, it is still alive, it is still there. But what it did, according, to just agree with him, was to remove, this thing, Kuti, an individual can bring a case. But what it does say, because that is where now I need to understand. It speaks of the issue of the jurisdiction, and then it speaks to the issue of exhausting local remedies first, or one must show that they are unable to proceed through the national courts pursuant to Article 15 of the Protocol on Southern Africa, tribunal, SADC, tribunal. And that Article 15, ladies and gentlemen, it speaks to issues of, jurisdiction, the scope of, jurisdiction. So under the scope of jurisdiction, it says that the tribunal shall have jurisdiction over disputes between states and between natural or legal persons in states. No natural or legal person shall bring an action against a state unless he or she has exhausted all available remedies or is unable to proceed under the domestic jurisdiction. Where a dispute is referred to the tribunal by any party, the consent of other parties to the dispute shall not be, required. But my question now is surrounding the, my question is on the obit, which says is unable to proceed under the domestic jurisdiction. What sort of conditions necessitates that? Ian, quickly, before I go to Mkoma KK, quickly, what sort of situation necessitates that?
So when I read that, I actually then found the reason why they pulled out of the Constitutional Court challenge, because it would have impinged on their excuse or their reason for bringing it directly to the tribunal. So the legal argument would be that, as they've always done and can prove with extant case law, that the courts in Zimbabwe are actually captured, and there's sufficient, how do you call it, surface area for them to argue that case successfully.
Right. Thank you very much. It is something that I've always spoken about here, to say that, because I think we engaged what is wrong Mofu yesterday on that particular issue as to choosing not to pursue domestic remedies and instead lobbying to SADC, to come in and be an adjudicator or being a go-between to settle, a dispute. And it was always, there's always this need which is found to be, important on the part of folks, from ZANU-PF to say that, they did not go to the courts. So as a result of not going to the courts, they lost, their claim or their right to want to, say that the election in Zimbabwe was not legitimate because there is no court in Zimbabwe that ruled against that. So that ruled and gave a ruling, to that effect. So thank you very much, for that. I want to bring in Mukoma, KK into the mix, and you're going to be followed by Naru Nendoro. You know what? Yes, you're going to be followed, by Nari and Love Thebes for Rosa. Thank you very much. Let us go, with that order, please. KK, are you there?
Okay, thank you, Mkoma Jeda.
Yes, let's go.
Okay, sure. So I would like to concur with a previous speaker. I mean, I think for the most part, we Zimbabweans haven't even fully explored what is available, through our especially our constitution that we have adopted since 2013. I don't think we have. And, I think there is still a few things that are available to us that we can fully explore to make sure that we build a country that mirrors our aspirations as a country. So to sort of look to politics in the way that people are suggesting, and obviously with a view to furthering the divisions that are already existing. It's something that we can explore, but I don't think it will bring us to where we want to be. If you've looked at the setup in our country, every election cycle that we've gone through, I think there is something that is still missing. And I say so because I've observed the way that, I cannot completely put it on opposition politics. I also believe that, the ruling party has done a lot to sort of not create any conducive environment for opposition politics, and even dissension within its own ranks, where you obviously get that feedback that that will be necessary for a country to progress. So there are elements of progressiveness which are not yet being adopted across the board. And I don't think any court would be able to solve those things. So it would be an issue of furthering those divisions in a way we're sitting on a time bomb. So I think
whilst you're on that point, because I need to then understand that we know that there are certain areas of our constitution that have not been aligned, or there are still issues surrounding to the alignment of the constitution to make the laws in Zimbabwe align to to the 2013 constitution. And yet when it comes to the issues that we're speaking about here, there's always this insistence that follow the constitution, follow the constitution, and yet nothing is being done to make sure that we have a fully operational constitution that is aligned to every law of this country, of Zimbabwe, such that there won't be any issue. But why is it when it comes to the dispute, constitution? What's up with that?
Okay, that's an important question. So there are things which my point that I'm trying to stress is that our only protection, right? I've heard people speak about, going beyond, our jurisdiction, going beyond. Yeah, that could perhaps work. I don't know whether it will work or not. I mean, whether there is actually precedence to that effect where an outside court can make a ruling pertaining to the issues that are in Zimbabwe. So the point that I always stress is that our only protection is our supreme law, which is our constitution, right? And you bring up an important question to say, but the laws have not been aligned to the constitution, and we've been sitting on that issue for quite some time now. I mean, since 2013, right? And I've not seen enough effort from opposition, from even our current, from previous parliamentarians that have occupied parliament to that effect, to actually prosecute those issues that are pertinent to us, which is obviously the alignment of the constitution. I've not seen people put out their entire efforts, branding, you name it, whatever it is, efforts towards actually attaining that objective as the basis for the country to move on when we have our laws aligned. So we still have, in fact, what we have also done is to protect political parties in our constitution. And how did we do that? That's when we took away the powers of our elected officials to be able to make laws themselves, to be able to judge independently laws that are in the favor of what the people are expecting, or that they can turn down on the basis of those laws not being in favor of the people. So we have given so much of our power to political parties, more than we have enabled our own MPs. So these are structural things that we must go back and begin to solve, bit by bit and by bit. We're never going to get this delivered at one go, like what we are expecting. My contribution to that effect that people can look at how the opposition performed in this election and come up with all kinds of conclusions. But my conclusion is that they did very well on this election. I mean, at their first election, they were able to get so many votes. I mean, so many members of parliament into parliament. They were able to get the councils under them. They were able to do all these things, which they can now swiftly use to their advantage. They are in the game. They are in government as we are speaking, right? So it's them now working without having to alienate the ruling party, because it still has its control. It still has control over many facets of our lives. So they need to skillfully begin to work their way in terms of building this opposition space, bearing in mind that tomorrow when they are in power, an opposition will also come up. And, their responsibility now, which I think they are shifting because they are narrowly looking at the issue of being in power, is to build an opposition space, is to do what they can do to make sure that the institution of opposition politics is respected in Zimbabwe. They have that chance now. It's a step-by-step thing. And when they have done that, they accrue so much respect that they are able to use that respect to convert it into them being into power the next election, or maybe other elections coming ahead. So I think the focus here is on just getting into power, and that's the reason why there's no one pushing the agenda of aligning our laws into which actually gives power back to the people. No one on the opposition side, no one on the ruling party side. So at the end, what do we end up having? We end up having this political class that is divorced from the realities of what is going on the ground, what actually will change the lives of people on the ground. I can take, for example, one important issue in the constitution, which is devolution. That is an issue which, if everybody is really vying for what is best for the people, that is the first thing that they can put on the table. And that will unlock a lot of some of these issues that we are discussing. When people can control their issues from their constituencies, from their localities, they can control the voters' roll. They know who's on the voters' roll. They have control.
I've got a question, Banaba, a comment, or rather a question, Yandapiwa, which I want to respond to. And this is what you are saying, Mkoma Mimi. You are shortchanging us here. because the previous parliament was ZANU-PF dominated, and by that they are the ones who did set the agenda on what to debate, and that then led to the avoidance of the alignment of the laws to the 2013 constitution. You cannot blame the opposition MPs of previous parliamentary terms. What you're saying is wrong. How do you respond to that?
That is just an argument which I'm saying.
I'm going to
I am saying yes. ZANU-PF was in control in the last parliament, and they obviously it gives them the vantage point to set their agenda. But that doesn't stop anyone in parliament to push as far as they can to make deals where they need to, in order to get the people's and whoever actually does that. I can give you an example of parliamentarians that today still stand out for championing even unpopular issues like obviously Themba Muliswa, and yet there were other parliamentarians we never heard anything about. So if we make this singular issue and make this choice like we are right now, because the whole issue is about getting into power, like we are right now, and we voice our concern as to giving the people the power to control their own destinies from their localities. If we make it an issue, I'm sure that issue, it won't be something that will happen in overnight, but it will begin to pick up. There are people right now that are saying in Mutare, we could have done well if this diamond sector was localized to us. There were times I would go to Mutare and you would see there's so much US dollars that were circulating in Mutare, which were totally taken away when the central government moved in to take control of that. If you give people power back to them, they are able to make even better and well-informed choices, and they know who has caused us to have control for our own destinies here in the Manicaland province. This is what I'm talking about.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, for that. You know what? So far, I think we started this at 5 p.m. and it is now 8:30. It is just gone past, 8:30. And I don't think we've had, a female voice on the platform. So if you can allow me, Nari, Nyamashisha, Mutsunga, Unindoro, Nimbo Kujamba, Mbijana, Nimbo Kujamba, Nimbo Pamasi Wilkes is the opportunity, to speak. I'll then come back. I'll then come to you, Nari. Right. So, thank you very much, for that. I'm sorry, man, but I'm just, saying thank you, in advance. Can I ask Masi Wilkes, to come in, and then in Nari, and Mopinda, Mozo, Sira, Chimuti, Kunani. Okay. Tozo, it's a fake round. But anyway, Masi, take the mic.
Thank Hello. Oh, sorry. I was speaking to a dead mic. Murukundinzo.
Yeah, go on. I can hear you. Yes.
Thank you, Uncle Jet. And I think if you didn't hear, gentlemen, I appreciate giving me the chance. I know I was last to come in. Muvunzo, more than anything, I was listening. These matters have become very complex, very intricate, and I think the political side keeps speaking to the question of what is possible legally. There is still that layer of the political will, the political strength, and the political connection to make whatever that could be legal as a possibility to be achievable. But the question that I raised my hand for was when KK was speaking. There are some things in Zimbabwe that have become so ambiguous, but they are very good as buzzwords. And it's not like they're picking them from nowhere. These are things that need to be attended to. Often we hear we need electoral reforms. Then we need the constitution to be aligned. But at no point as Zimbabwean citizen performing our own citizen duty that will inform those who will represent us in the August House where they must legislate and make sure those things happen. We do not speak of what particular thing remains pending. It becomes a bracket statement, and those debates never happen. It's worrisome because it leaves us not knowing what we must attend to then interrogate how we can achieve it. So I'm hoping that someone actually goes to go to the thing that needs alignment and then proffer solutions to how it must be aligned. To what degree is it needing that alignment? Because I think that's how ZANU-PF has often got away with things, these technicalities of ambiguity. In fact, it is ZANU-PF that has been playing the politics of strategic ambiguity by leaving the constitution in that manner. They have had the veto power in parliament to attend to these things. That is not to dismiss the role that the other participants within the legislative house had to do. But I think this crime by omission that our government has been doing has been deliberate, because they have managed, when they have to restore power to the executive, been able to attend to specifics of the constitution for the purposes of raping that constitution, to the point where now what was original, the voice of the people, now reflects the voice of the executive speaking to the people. And that is worrisome. We continue in that trajectory in the next 5 years, considering the trigger happiness of our executive to go through the constitution insofar as hundreds of times, we will not be left with a recognizable constitution that we'll be speaking to. It will be power reverse. The executive now speaking down on the people when the constitution must speak up to power. So I'm hoping that for the gentlemen and would speak directly to the things that we must attend to, so that when we then address our representatives, we are very specific to the things that we want them to return to us, saying they have lodged in parliament. And it doesn't mean that if you're opposition, you cannot speak to the MP who represents you in your constituency. At that particular time, they are no longer partisan. And ZANU-PF MPs must be lobbied by opposition people as well, because right now they are representative. So let's speak to those constitutional things that remain pending, not just speak to them in bracket statements, such that we do not know the priority that must be given. And I think it should also speak to us as citizens right now, to be speaking to our leaders and saying, we need you to draft and deliver to us citizens, identifying the constitutional principles that have not been aligned. And then we should begin a process of giving timeframes where they must present these things and return with a report of what happened, so that we know. We investigate what the citizen duty becomes in the event that there's a continuation of this crime of omission, of avoidance, and displacement. We can't live in a country of being ambiguous about a lot of things. Otherwise, let's chuck the constitution away, restart and run the country as in what we think, because the constitution no longer applies if it cannot be implementable. That was my point, Uncle Jet.
Right, thank you very much. On that point, koma vabvunza mubvunzo comment wamaisa comment yandaisa kuna K, he went on and he said kuti problem iripo ndeyekuti folks need to avoid the naked facts, because if you're looking at our previous 43 years, ZANU-PF has failed the country, and it has it has picked and it has chosen what laws they want repealed. Hence, we still have those pre-colonial laws that still linger around and that are being applied by the courts. If you can remember, the issue was raised by Wopwell and Fadzai Mahere when they were being persecuted or or prosecuted, whatever you might want to call it. And then he goes on to say the 2013 constitution makes it worse to align, as there are still laws lingering, lingering around, and those which still needs to be repealed. So the bottom line is that ZANU-PF government is addressed and set the agenda of laws that advantage them. It needs. So I'm thinking this is why Mkoma is saying it's still this is why they need 2/3 majority in some in some laws to be aligned, in others a simple majority of above 50%. So he then finishes off and says these guys are simply young to know the historical background of the country, of where the country has come from. Apologies, I'm trying to make out some of the mistakes, but anyway, we can make it out what you're saying. So in fact, all these propagandists are children or sympathizers of the regime by being kids or relatives of ZANU-PF aging folks or beneficiaries of the Presidential Scholarship Fund and do not know the legacy issues that wrong the nation. They lean on they lean on the historical timeline events. I'm sorry, I can't speak out directly those that are running na Mukoma in response to this issue, alignment of the laws or what the constitution speak to. In the recommendation, there was an issue that was raised on the electoral law, and a recommendation to say, I think, let me read on the vote. The establishment, in Harare, such that they went all guns, blazing on Mumba when they accused him of, speaking to our laws and wanting us to change, our laws. But anyway, let us, move on. Thanks, Master, for that. Nari, Mapo erapo Nari, zviri sei?
Yes, ndapo
Aiwa,
Mwanawanyamunhu.
ndakasimba makasimba mukoma. Right. Ndingitora ichimuti kana mimi muchinge ndingimataura ndoda kumboita circle back kune varipo kutanga. I know kuti anotida mambo batwa maresponse, saka I'll give you the opportunity yekuti ndingi mutaure Citizen Z. I'll bring you into the mix. Senior, I'll bring you into the mix. KK, I'll bring you into the mix. But I'll bring you into the mix. Saka hande nacho tinzwe nhari kuti muri kuzviona sei nyaya yekuobserva iyi nekuripota nekuofa marecommendations, hanzi ndo zvatinongoita isusu nhingi sesadhak. Saka dhisi tarisiro iyi inenge iripo yekuti pane chichabva kusadhak chichaita kuti izvo tinge tichienda kunoita mamwe maelections iri kubva papi nhaye mukoma imi sekunzwisisa kwenyu kana manga muri kufollowa election nemaitikiro yakaita nepatave iko zvinezvi.
Or okay, it's fine. Yeah, for my point of view, what I'm seeing, this organization of that evil autocratic regime, they are dealing with bribes to maintain their grip on power. They are power hungry, but they don't perform. And to those, as we are compared to that old Madala Mugabe's era, it was far much better than this ZANU-PF what we have now. Okay, let's quickly go into the story. Since I don't think since 1980 when this current president was a minister, I don't think he had win any election. Because let's go into the religion. In Rimsabata and in Rimsabata, Zatine kana munhu asingaperform whether the pastor or whatever, there's a change in it. And the leadership it works with the anointment. Leadership, it works with the anointment. So to those who are closer to the president, if they don't tell president the right thing to do, there's some people take the positions to fill their pockets only. Yeah, okay. If ZANU-PF won the elections, what's the purpose to abduct the opposition people, to arrest them? At the end of the day, when they are going to court, then they will dismiss them. They say those people, they are not guilty. You see, ndiri kuzama kutaura inini kuti hurumende iripo, right? Makawina maelections inini post yatoziva ndechekuti mukuru wenyika nyange ukanzi right wakawina maelections, haumiririre pati yangu uchikondesa uyu vanhu vese vari munyika vana vako, haugone kusegregeta kuti uyu ndewangu uyu haasi wangu. Hazviko izvozvo zvinhu zvakadaro. Tochidzoka pakuti situation iri munyika, hapana asi kuziva zviri munyika. Kune vari kumusoro kuvamwe varipo, kwete kuti hanzi vari kuda kuti kana kuti vari kusapota mukuru wenyika zvaari kuita. Vamwe vari toripo nenhau yekuti vari kuba. Vazhinji vacho vamwe hatichataura zvedu nemazita. Some of them they are thieves. Vari kutoba. Unotoona kuti zvaitoitika nguva yamudhara uyu wekushaya wawakabvisa nechisimba zvaitove nani. Ezvinezvi muri kuona nyika yakuita kunge playground, vana java vasina kana zvavanoziva, vanenge vachitaura zvinhu zvisina kana nemusoro wese. Ndovanoitwa vanenge vachisungwa. Makada kutarisa kana maactivities ari kuita. Munhu wese anenge aida kuita corruption ari kuenda unohwanda neZANU-PF kuti awane kuita dirty game rake raanenge achiita ikoko. Panhau yekunzi maelection, touya panhau maelections ekuti kunzi maelections ainzi anogona kunzi adzokoro kana kuti SADC kutaura kuti yedu nyaya ndeyekungobserva. Alright, if you have observed something, what's the next? So if you zvakangofanana nekurega, because if you observe, kana observe wazozoita sei? Because each and everyone they know kuti kuZimbabwe vanhu citizens ari kutambudzika, hatina industry, hatina chi. Okay, let's take a example for the South African government. ANC yacho yavanoti sisterning yavo. Makada kupinda muSouth Africa chaimo munoona mavakirwa makati industry they are running. Zimbabwe hatina industry. Zvipatara hatichataura, ko izo zvikoro hatichataura, ko ivo vashandi vehurumende vari kuchema, vari kuridza mhere every day. There's someone who didn't educated, anonzi ndiye anogona kudecide future yemunhu akaita 7 years achiita degree paUZ. Guys, ngatitarise tisina masides atakadai, ngatinyatsotariseiwo tega, so kutarisa tega kuona kuti nyika iri kubva kupi iri kuenda kupi. At the end of the story, ende kana nevana vari kuzvara chaivo vachachema nesame person nevanhu vamwe chete vavo, nekuti they recruiting their young ones nevana vavo kuti vapinde musystem yevada abducted that system. But mukada kutarisa mudhara wavakabvisa nechisimba, zvinhu zvacho aizonyara mudhara wayo, aizobuda achitaura kuti no, zvakuitika izvi hazvisiri izvezvi. Makada kutarisa vamwe vanhu vakadzoswa ministry akadzoswa izvezvi, vakanga vachidzingwa nemudhara akabva kudzingirwa umbavha. Ani muri kuzviona? Saka sevana veZimbabwe, right, vana veZimbabwe ndo vanochuza munhu wavanoda kuti avatungamiriri. Alright, takuchuza toti let's say watiwo wachuzwa nevanhu. So I feel painful. Ende mukada kutarisa kana kuti chimiro chenyika yedu iri kubva kupi iri kuenda kupi, handizvinzwisise. Pamwe ndini ndega ndiri kurasika. Ndotenda hangu mukoma.
All right, thank you very much, for that. Let us, move on. And you were the only person that had not spoken. So what I will do now is I just want, to circle back to folks, that have, spoken before, to give them, another opportunity to. So the audience, the audience. Oh, hey, easy. Right, sorry. Sorry, guys. Right. Can I go to... Right, let me see. Can I go to Signoro? And from Signoro, we go to Citizen Z. From Citizen Z, Padare, I don't see your hand up. Do you want to speak? Or do you jump 20 toenda pana anoti